There are historical mysteries that remain hidden, buried beneath deserts, lost beneath forests, forgotten beneath the weight of time, yet traces endure. Fragments of walls, silent monuments, cryptic symbols carved by hands long turned to dust. Join us as we journey through nearly 3 hours of remarkable discoveries, enigmatic ruins, and ancient landscapes that continue to puzzle researchers today. Exploring clues from the distant past that may challenge everything we thought we knew about the world that came before our own. Far above the waters of Lake Nasser, where the desert stretches toward a hazy horizon and the wind carries grains of sand across ancient stone, a lonely fortress stands upon a cliff. Its walls are broken, its towers are silent. Yet for thousands of years, this place watched empires rise and disappear. Qasr Ibrim, a settlement unlike almost any other in the Nile Valley. Most of ancient Nubia vanished beneath the waters during the 20th century, when the construction of the Aswan High Dam transformed the landscape forever. Temples were relocated, villages disappeared, entire archaeological sites were swallowed by the expanding reservoir. But Qasr Ibrim endured. Perched high above the floodwaters, it survived as a rare witness to a world that largely vanished beneath the lake. Today, the ruins appear isolated, almost detached from time. Yet there was a period when this rocky stronghold occupied one of the most important positions in northeastern Africa. Its location explains much of its story. The fortress stood along a critical section of the Nile, one of the ancient world's greatest arteries of communication and trade. Whoever controlled this position could monitor movement along the river, regulate commerce, and project power deep into Nubia. The cliff itself provided formidable protection. Steep slopes guarded the settlement on multiple sides, turning nature into a defensive ally. Long before the fortress reached its greatest prominence, people recognized the strategic value of this place. The earliest evidence of occupation reaches back into antiquity, during periods when Egyptian influence expanded southward beyond the traditional borders of the pharaohs. Nubia possessed resources that attracted powerful neighbors: gold, ivory, exotic animals, precious woods. Trade routes carrying these commodities became increasingly important, and fortified centers emerged to protect them. Qasr Ibrim became one of those centers. Over the centuries, armies crossed the region. Administrators governed it. Merchants enriched themselves through its connections. Yet, despite repeated foreign influence, Nubia was never merely a passive frontier. Local cultures adapted, resisted, and transformed outside ideas, creating something uniquely their own. This process unfolded repeatedly at Qasr Ibrim. Egyptians arrived, then Kushite rulers. Later came the Ptolemies. The Romans followed, then Christian kingdoms, then Islamic communities. Layer upon layer, century upon century. Few archaeological sites anywhere preserve such a continuous sequence of occupation. In many ancient cities, long periods of abandonment separate one civilization from another. Here, life continued. Buildings changed, beliefs evolved, languages shifted, but the settlement endured. You can almost sense those centuries compressed together within the stone. Walk through the ruins today, and every wall seems to belong to more than one era. A structure built for one purpose may have been altered generations later for something entirely different. Temples became churches. Administrative buildings became residences. Defenses were repaired, expanded, and rebuilt again. The site became a living archive of adaptation. One of the most fascinating chapters emerged during the Christian period of Nubian history. Many people are surprised to learn that powerful Christian kingdoms flourished south of Egypt for centuries. While much of Europe struggled through political upheaval following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, sophisticated Christian societies developed along the Nile. Qasr Ibrim became one of their important centers. Churches rose within the fortress walls. Religious leaders governed communities. Artists painted vivid frescoes. Scribes copied manuscripts. The settlement transformed into a center of faith, administration, and learning. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of this remarkable period in the form of churches, inscriptions, documents, and religious artifacts. These discoveries revealed a civilization that had often been overlooked in traditional narratives of world history. But perhaps the greatest treasure of Qasr Ibrim was not its architecture. It was its climate. The extreme dryness of Nubia preserved materials that would have vanished almost everywhere else. Textiles survived. Leather survived. Wood survived. Food remains survived. Most importantly, documents survived. Hundreds upon hundreds of texts emerged from excavations. Letters, contracts, religious writings, official records, personal correspondence. Through these fragile pieces of writing, individuals separated from us by centuries suddenly become visible. They argued over property. They discussed taxation. They negotiated agreements. They worried about daily concerns that still feel surprisingly familiar. History becomes human, not kings and empires alone. Ordinary lives, ordinary voices. Yet, the abundance of information creates new mysteries rather than eliminating them. Researchers can reconstruct portions of life at Qasr Ibrim with extraordinary detail, but many larger questions remain unresolved. How exactly did the population navigate dramatic political transitions that unfolded around them? How much independence did local leaders truly possess during periods of foreign domination? To what extent did older traditions survive beneath newer religious identities? The answers remain frustratingly elusive. Some mysteries emerge from what is absent rather than what survives. Entire chapters of the site's history remain incomplete. Archaeologists possess fragments of evidence, but not the full story. A document may reference events whose details are otherwise unknown. A structure may hint at activities that left few traces behind. Every discovery illuminates one corner of the past while revealing new shadows beyond it. Even the fortress itself raises questions. Why did this particular location remain important for so many centuries when countless neighboring settlements declined or vanished? Was its survival purely strategic? Or did deeper cultural and economic factors sustain its significance across generations? No consensus fully explains its remarkable longevity. Then came the modern era. The construction of the Aswan High Dam changed Nubia forever. Archaeologists raced against time to document endangered sites before rising waters engulfed them. International rescue efforts became one of the largest archaeological campaigns in history. Many monuments were saved. Many were lost. Qasr Ibrim became something unique, a surviving island of ancient history overlooking a transformed landscape. Today, surrounded by the vast waters of Lake Nasser, the fortress appears more isolated than ever before. The Nile world that sustained it for millennia has been fundamentally altered. The roots, communities, and landscapes that once connected to the settlement largely exist only in memory and archaeological records, and perhaps that isolation deepens its mystery. As evening falls across the reservoir, shadows creep over the ancient walls. The wind moves through empty structures once filled with soldiers, merchants, priests, and families. Somewhere beneath the accumulated layers of stone and sand remain stories that have never been recovered. Who were the final people to call this fortress home? What knowledge disappeared before the modern world arrived? And how many secrets still lie hidden within one of the last surviving sentinels of ancient Nubia, waiting silently above the water, refusing to surrender its full story? High in the rugged hills of northeastern China, far from the great rivers traditionally associated with the birth of civilization, an ancient ceremonial landscape stretches across the mountains. Stone structures emerge from the earth. Mysterious platforms crown the ridges. Burials lie hidden beneath layers of soil and time. For thousands of years, the site remained forgotten. Then, archaeologists uncovered something unexpected, something that challenged long-standing assumptions about the origins of complex society in ancient China. The place is known today as New Heliang, and despite decades of research, it continues to raise profound questions about a culture that flourished more than 5,000 years ago, leaving behind monuments, symbols, and beliefs whose full meaning remains elusive. The story begins with the Hongshan culture, a Neolithic civilization that occupied parts of northeastern China between roughly 4,700 and 2,900 BCE. For much of the 20th century, discussions about the emergence of Chinese civilization focused primarily on the Yellow River Basin. It was there that scholars traditionally sought the roots of later dynasties and states. Yet New Heliang suggested that another story had been unfolding far from those familiar centers. A very different story. Spread across a vast area of hills and valleys, the site is not a city in the conventional sense. There are no towering defensive walls, no evidence of dense urban neighborhoods, no obvious palaces. Instead, what archaeologists discovered appears to be a monumental ceremonial landscape, a sacred geography, a place designed not primarily for living, but for ritual. The scale is striking. Stone platforms occupy elevated locations. Tombs are arranged with apparent care. Ritual structures stand at strategic points across the terrain. The entire complex seems to have been planned according to principles that are still not fully understood. Even today, standing among the hills, you gain the impression that every ridge and slope mattered. Every position meant something. Every structure belonged to a larger design. One discovery in particular captured worldwide attention. Buried within a temple-like structure, archaeologists uncovered fragments of clay sculptures unlike anything expected from such an ancient period. Among them were pieces of large human figures, including a face with eyes inlaid with jade. The find became known as the Goddess Temple. The name itself evokes mystery. Who was this figure? A deity? An ancestor? A symbolic representation of power? No written records survive to answer these questions. The people who built the site left no decipherable texts. Their beliefs must be reconstructed from architecture, artifacts, and context alone. The clay figures suggest a sophisticated religious tradition. They imply ceremonial practices that required planning, organization, and shared belief systems. Such activities rarely emerge in isolation. They usually reflect communities capable of mobilizing labor and coordinating complex projects. This realization carried significant implications. For many years, archaeologists believed that large-scale ceremonial architecture emerged relatively late in northeastern China. New Heliang forced a reevaluation of that assumption. Here was evidence of monumental construction dating back more than 5 millennia, evidence of social complexity, evidence of organized ritual activity, evidence that challenged conventional timelines. Yet the site revealed another remarkable feature: jade. Large quantities of jade artifacts have been discovered in association with the Hongshan culture. Some of the most famous are intricately carved objects that appear to depict dragons or dragon-like creatures. Their forms are abstract, elegant, and unmistakably sophisticated. The craftsmanship is astonishing. Working jade is difficult even with advanced tools. It requires patience, skill, and specialized knowledge. The presence of such objects suggests artisans devoted significant time to their production. But why? Were these symbols of authority, sacred objects, markers of status? The answer remains uncertain. What is clear is that jade held extraordinary importance. The effort invested in obtaining and shaping it indicates value beyond mere decoration. These artifacts likely carried meanings deeply embedded within the spiritual and social world of the Hongshan people, and that world remains only partially visible. The burials at New Heliang provide further clues. Some tombs contain elaborate grave goods, while others are more modest. Such differences may indicate social hierarchy. Certain individuals appear to have received special treatment in death, suggesting distinctions of rank, prestige, or religious significance. Yet the nature of that hierarchy remains debated. Was there a ruling elite, a priestly class, regional leaders overseeing dispersed communities, or something entirely different? Archaeologists continue to examine the evidence, but definitive answers remain elusive. The surrounding landscape adds another layer of intrigue. Unlike many ancient ceremonial centers built in fertile lowlands, New Heliang occupies a mountainous environment. The choice appears deliberate. Certain structures align with prominent natural features. Hills and ridges seem integrated into the overall design. Nature itself became part of the monument. This relationship between architecture and landscape raises fascinating possibilities. The builders may have viewed the mountains as sacred. Ritual activities may have incorporated celestial observations, seasonal cycles, or symbolic connections between earth and sky. But without written records, certainty remains beyond reach. You stand upon one of the ridges and look across the terrain. The hills roll into the distance. Stone platforms emerge from the landscape like fragments of a forgotten vision. The silence feels almost intentional, as though the site still guards knowledge it was never meant to reveal easily. And perhaps that impression is not entirely misplaced. One of the enduring mysteries surrounding New Heliang concerns its eventual decline. The Hongshan culture flourished for centuries. Monumental projects were completed. Ritual traditions developed. Communities invested enormous effort into ceremonial activities. Then, over time, the culture faded. Why? Climate change has been proposed as one possibility. Environmental shifts may have altered local conditions, placing pressure on populations and resources. Other researchers suggest broader social transformations, migrations, or cultural reorganization. Yet none of these explanations fully resolve the question. The disappearance remains only partially understood. The same is true for the site's wider significance. Was New Heliang an isolated ceremonial center serving nearby communities? Or was it part of a much larger network extending across vast regions? Did its religious ideas influence later traditions? Could some of its symbols represent distant ancestors of concepts that emerged thousands of years afterward? Such questions continue to inspire debate. As evening shadows stretch across the mountains, the ancient platforms take on an almost otherworldly appearance. The goddess temple lies silent. Jade artifacts rest behind museum glass. The people who created this extraordinary landscape vanished long ago, yet their presence lingers in the carved stone, in the carefully arranged tombs, in the monumental vision that transformed an entire mountain range into a sacred space. And somewhere within those hills, hidden between what archaeology has uncovered and what remains buried beneath the earth, the deeper story of New Heliang may still be waiting, an ancient chapter of human history whose most important secrets have yet to be revealed. On the eastern outskirts of modern Baghdad, where expanding neighborhoods and busy roads now dominate the landscape, an ancient mound once concealed the remains of a forgotten Mesopotamian city. To a casual observer, it appeared unremarkable, a rise of earth shaped by centuries of wind, rain, and human activity. But beneath that mound lay the remnants of a world nearly 4,000 years old, a world of scribes and merchants, of priests and administrators, of mathematics, law, and power. The site is known today as Tel Harmal, and although it lacks the fame of cities such as Babylon or Ur, its discoveries have provided some of the most fascinating insights into daily life in ancient Mesopotamia. Yet, for all that has been uncovered, Tel Harmal continues to raise questions about the complexities of a civilization that helped shape human history. The ancient name of the settlement was Shadupum. It flourished during the early 2nd millennium BCE, a period when Mesopotamia was divided among competing kingdoms and city-states. The region was politically fragmented yet culturally interconnected. Trade routes linked distant settlements. Ideas moved alongside goods. Administrators governed increasingly complex societies through systems of record-keeping and bureaucracy. Writing was everywhere. Clay tablets recorded transactions, legal disputes, tax obligations, and official correspondence. In Mesopotamia, information itself became a tool of power. Tel Harmal occupied a strategic position within this world. Located near the Diyala River system, and not far from the great urban centers of southern Mesopotamia, the settlement served as both an administrative and defensive hub. Though relatively small compared to the greatest cities of the age, it was clearly important enough to warrant substantial fortifications. Archaeologists first recognized this importance during excavations in the 20th century. As layers of soil were removed, walls began to emerge, then buildings, then streets, and finally thousands of artifacts that illuminated a forgotten chapter of Mesopotamian history. Among the most impressive discoveries were the city's defensive structures. Massive walls surrounded the settlement, reinforced by towers and gates designed to protect its inhabitants. These fortifications suggest a world where security mattered deeply. Conflict between rival states was common, and settlements often faced threats from both organized armies and smaller raiding groups. The walls projected strength, but they also projected anxiety. Civilizations often build their most formidable defenses when they perceive danger, and ancient Mesopotamia knew danger well. Kingdoms rose rapidly and collapsed just as quickly. Alliances shifted. Ambitious rulers sought territory and prestige. Entire cities could prosper for generations before finding themselves caught in the ambitions of a neighboring power. Within the protection of its walls, however, life continued. People worked, traded, prayed, raised families, and left behind traces of their existence in astonishing detail. The true significance of Tel Harmal emerged through its tablets. Thousands of clay tablets were discovered at the site, many preserved remarkably well despite the passage of nearly 4 millennia. Written in cuneiform script, these records opened a direct window into the administrative machinery of the ancient world. Some tablets contained routine economic information, inventories, deliveries, accounts, lists of goods. Others documented legal matters and official communications. Together, they revealed a society deeply dependent on written records. Nothing important was left to memory alone. Everything was documented. Everything was tracked. Everything was recorded in clay. Yet among these documents, archaeologists encountered something even more remarkable: mathematics. Ancient Mesopotamian civilization is already famous for its contributions to mathematics, but Tel Harmal provided additional evidence of just how sophisticated this knowledge could be. Several tablets contain mathematical problems and calculations that continue to impress modern scholars. These were not simple exercises. Some demonstrate advanced geometric reasoning. Others reveal methods for solving complex numerical problems. The scribes responsible for these texts possessed a level of mathematical understanding that many people would not associate with such a distant era. It is a striking reminder. The ancient world was not intellectually primitive. Far from it. Many of its greatest achievements remain underappreciated precisely because they emerged so long ago. Imagine entering a scribal school at Tel Harmal nearly 4,000 years in the past. Young students sit with clay tablets before them. Teachers dictate exercises. Numbers are copied and recalculated. Mistakes are corrected. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next. Outside, merchants negotiate transactions, and officials oversee administrative affairs. But inside these rooms, something equally important is occurring: the preservation of information, the cultivation of expertise, the transmission of civilization itself. Yet, despite the wealth of written material, many aspects of Tel Harmal remain obscure. The settlement appears to have functioned as part of a larger regional system, but its exact role is still debated. Was it primarily a military outpost, an administrative center, a commercial hub linking nearby communities? Perhaps it was all three. The evidence supports multiple interpretations. And, as often happens in archaeology, every answer generates new questions. Religious life at the site also remains only partially understood. Temples and sacred spaces likely played important roles within the community, as they did throughout Mesopotamia. Religion permeated daily existence. Rituals were performed. Prayers were recited. Yet the surviving evidence reveals only fragments of these practices. Much of the spiritual life of Tel Harmal remains hidden behind the silence of time. You can almost feel that silence when imagining the site today. The bustling streets are gone. The voices have vanished. The markets are empty. Only foundations remain. And yet the clay tablets endure, thousands of them, waiting patiently beneath the earth until archaeologists brought them once more into the light. Perhaps that is what makes Tel Harmal so compelling. Many ancient sites impress through monumental architecture. Massive pyramids, colossal temples, towering statues. Tel Harmal offers something different: intimacy. Its greatest treasures are not giant monuments, but records of thought, records of administration, records of education, records of ordinary people navigating an extraordinary civilization. Through these documents, we glimpse the mechanisms that allowed cities and kingdoms to function. We see how information was organized, how resources were managed, and how knowledge was preserved across generations. But we also encounter limitations. The tablets tell us much, yet they do not tell us everything. Countless documents were lost. Countless stories disappeared. Entire lives passed unrecorded. As evening settles over the landscape where Shadupam once stood, it becomes clear how much remains unknown. The fortified city that thrived here helped sustain one of humanity's earliest complex civilizations. Its scribes calculated, recorded, and preserved knowledge with remarkable precision. And yet their own story remains incomplete. Who were the individuals behind those tablets? What ambitions drove the city's leaders? What fears prompted the construction of such formidable defenses? And how many secrets of Tel Harmal still lie buried beneath the soil, waiting for future discoveries to reveal another fragment of Mesopotamia's endlessly fascinating past? In the far northern reaches of South Africa, where rugged hills rise above the vast savannas of the Limpopo Valley, the remains of an ancient stone settlement sit quietly among the trees. At first glance, the ruins seem modest. Weathered walls trace the outlines of long, abandoned structures. Stones lie scattered across the hillside. Centuries of wind and rain have softened the sharp edges of what was once a thriving center of power. Yet appearances can be deceptive. For beneath these stones lies the story of a forgotten kingdom, one that flourished at the crossroads of regional and international trade networks long before European colonization reshaped southern Africa. The site is known as Thulamela, and despite decades of archaeological research, many aspects of its history remain tantalizingly uncertain. The ruins occupy a commanding position within what is now the northern part of Kruger National Park. From the hilltop, the surrounding landscape stretches for miles in every direction. Rivers weave through the terrain. Rocky outcrops punctuate the horizon. It is a landscape that rewards careful observation. The people who built Thulamela understood that. Its location was no accident. The settlement developed between approximately the 13th and 17th centuries, during a period when southern Africa was home to a number of complex societies connected through trade, migration, and cultural exchange. Although many popular narratives once portrayed pre-colonial southern Africa as isolated from broader global developments, archaeology has revealed a very different picture. Thulamela stood within a world of movement. Goods traveled vast distances. Ideas crossed regions. Communities interacted in ways that are only now becoming fully appreciated. The stone walls that define the site immediately invite comparison with other famous southern African settlements, particularly those associated with the broader tradition of stone-built societies that emerged across the region. The builders carefully stacked stones without mortar, creating durable walls that have survived for centuries. The craftsmanship is impressive, not monumental in the way of Egyptian pyramids or Mesopotamian temples, but deliberate, sophisticated, confident. The settlement itself appears to have been socially organized, with distinct areas likely serving different functions. Elevated sections may have housed elite individuals, while other spaces supported everyday activities. Such patterns suggest a hierarchical society in which status and authority influenced the arrangement of the built environment. Yet the details remain elusive. No written records created by the inhabitants survive. The people of Thulamela left architecture, artifacts, and burials, but not texts capable of explaining their political structure, religious beliefs, or historical events in their own words. As a result, archaeologists must reconstruct the past from fragments, and fragments can be ambiguous. Among the most significant discoveries at the site were elite burials. These graves contained remarkable artifacts, including gold ornaments, beads, and other prestige goods. Their presence immediately drew attention because they demonstrated access to wealth and long-distance trade networks. Gold, in particular, carried profound implications. the Limpopo region possessed valuable resources, and evidence suggests that local societies participated in commercial systems extending far beyond southern Africa. Goods moved through interconnected networks, linking inland communities with trading centers along the Indian Ocean coast. From there, commodities could travel even farther, across the ocean, toward Arabia, India, and beyond. This realization transformed scholarly understanding of the region. Far from existing in isolation, settlements such as Thulamela participated in broader economic systems that connected distant cultures. A bead discovered in a burial might have originated hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. A piece of imported pottery could represent journeys spanning continents. The ruins suddenly became part of a much larger story, one involving merchants, intermediaries, and exchange networks operating across extraordinary distances. Imagine arriving at Thulamela during its height. The settlement is alive with activity. People move along pathways between stone structures. Artisans work with metal and other materials. Leaders oversee community affairs. Traders bring news and goods from distant regions. The surrounding countryside supports agriculture and livestock, providing the resources necessary to sustain the population. From the hilltop, you watch the landscape below and understand why this location mattered. Visibility means security. Visibility means control. Visibility means knowledge. Those who occupied the heights could monitor movement across the surrounding territory. They could see approaching visitors. They could observe opportunities and threats alike. Yet, despite growing knowledge about Thulamela, major questions remain unanswered. One of the most persistent concerns the identity of its rulers. Who governed this settlement? How was authority exercised? Did power rest with hereditary leaders, religious specialists, powerful families, or some combination of these? The archaeological evidence provides clues, but not certainty. The elite burials suggest social ranking. The settlement layout implies hierarchy, but the precise mechanisms of governance remain hidden. Another mystery involves the site's relationship with neighboring societies. Thulamela did not exist alone. The broader region contained numerous communities connected through trade, kinship, competition, and migration. Archaeologists continue to debate how these interactions shaped the development of the settlement. Was Thulamela a regional capital exercising influence over surrounding populations? A strategic trade center? A ceremonial and political hub? Perhaps all of these roles overlapped. The evidence resists simple interpretation. Then there is the question of decline. Like many ancient centers, Thulamela eventually lost its prominence. The reasons remain uncertain. Changes in trade routes may have played a role. Political transformations elsewhere in the region may have altered existing networks. Environmental pressures could have contributed. Population movements may have reshaped the social landscape. No single explanation fully accounts for what happened. The settlement gradually faded from history. Its buildings deteriorated. Its walls weathered. Its stories became increasingly difficult to recover. Centuries passed. Trees grew among the ruins. Animals moved through abandoned spaces. The memory of the community that once flourished here slowly disappeared. Only archaeology brought it back into view. Yet even now, the site retains an air of mystery. As the sun sinks toward the horizon and long shadows stretch across the stone walls, Thulamela feels suspended between presence and absence. The evidence is real. The achievements are undeniable. A prosperous and connected society existed here, participating in networks that reached far beyond the local landscape. And still, so much remains unknown. Who were the men and women buried with gold and precious beads? What stories did traders carry into the settlement from distant lands? What beliefs guided the people who built these walls upon the hill? And how many answers remain hidden beneath the soil of Thulamela, waiting for future discoveries to reveal another chapter of a history that refuses to give up all of its secrets? Across the highlands of north-central Mexico, where dry grasslands stretch toward distant mountains and volcanic ridges rise from the landscape, a vast complex of ancient stone structures stands atop a rugged hill. Massive terraces climb the slopes. Long walls cut across the terrain. Stairways ascend toward elevated plazas and ceremonial spaces. At first sight, the ruins seem almost defensive, like a fortress, like a city preparing for war. Yet for generations, archaeologists have struggled to answer a deceptively simple question. What exactly was La Camada? A military stronghold, a ceremonial center, a trading hub, a frontier outpost, or something entirely different? Despite decades of study, the site continues to resist easy classification, making it one of the most intriguing archaeological mysteries in ancient Mexico. The ruins are located in the modern Mexican state of Zacatecas, hundreds of kilometers north of the great urban centers traditionally associated with Mesoamerican civilization. For many years, scholars viewed this region as peripheral to the major developments occurring farther south. La Camada complicated that view. Dramatically, the site flourished roughly between the 6th and 9th centuries CE, during a period when major transformations were unfolding throughout ancient Mexico. Powerful cities rose and fell. Trade networks expanded. Populations migrated across vast territories. Political alliances shifted. Entire regions experienced profound change. Within this dynamic environment, La Camada emerged as a remarkable center. Its architecture immediately commands attention. The builders reshaped the natural hill through an enormous investment of labor. Terraces were constructed to create level spaces. Stone walls defined plazas and pathways. Monumental staircases connected different sections of the settlement. Elevated platforms offered commanding views of the surrounding countryside. Nothing about the site appears accidental. Every feature suggests planning, organization, purpose. One of the most striking structures is the Hall of Columns, a large architectural complex that once supported rows of stone pillars. Although the roof disappeared long ago, the surviving columns still create a powerful impression. Walking among them today feels almost surreal. The pillars rise from the earth like silent witnesses to forgotten ceremonies. Their original function remains debated. They may have supported a roof covering a gathering space. They may have served political, religious, or administrative purposes. No one knows for certain, and that uncertainty echoes throughout the site. Another remarkable feature is the immense defensive wall extending across a part of the hill. Its scale immediately raises questions. Why would such substantial fortifications be necessary? Were the inhabitants under threat? Were they protecting valuable resources? Or did the walls serve symbolic purposes in addition to military ones? The answers remain elusive. Yet, the defensive appearance of La Camada has long influenced interpretations of the site. Some researchers proposed that it functioned as a fortress, guarding important routes through northern Mexico. The surrounding region occupied a strategic position between the cultures of central Mexico and the more mobile groups inhabiting northern territories. Control of movement through this landscape may have carried significant economic and political advantages. Trade likely played an important role. Artifacts discovered at La Quemada indicate connections with distant regions. Goods moved across large distances, linking communities separated by mountains, deserts, and valleys. Obsidian, ceramics, and other materials reveal participation in broader exchange networks. The settlement was not isolated. Far from it. People arrived here from elsewhere. Ideas arrived here from elsewhere. Influences arrived here from elsewhere. The site occupied a crossroads of cultures, and crossroads often become places of complexity. One of the most enduring mysteries involves La Quemada's relationship with the great city of Teotihuacan, which dominated much of central Mexico for centuries before its decline. Earlier, scholars sometimes viewed La Quemada as a northern outpost connected directly to Teotihuacan's sphere of influence. The evidence, however, remains inconclusive. Certain similarities exist. Certain connections appear plausible. Yet no definitive proof has emerged demonstrating direct political control. Instead, the relationship may have been more subtle, a web of trade, cultural exchange, and indirect influence, rather than straightforward domination. This ambiguity continues to fuel debate. The people of La Quemada seem determined to remain partially hidden behind the archaeological record. You stand atop one of the elevated terraces and gaze across the surrounding landscape. The view is extraordinary. Rolling hills stretch toward distant horizons. Natural routes through the region become visible. The strategic advantages of the location are immediately apparent. Whoever occupied this hill understood geography. They understood visibility. They understood power. Yet power can take many forms: military power, economic power, religious power, social power. The challenge lies in determining which of these mattered most. Evidence of ritual activity suggests that ceremonial functions played a significant role. Plazas and elevated spaces may have hosted gatherings, processions, and religious events. Architecture often communicates authority through symbolism as much as through practical utility. Perhaps the fortress-like appearance reflects not only defense, but also prestige. A statement, a declaration visible across the landscape, an architectural expression of influence. The site's decline presents another puzzle. By around the 10th century CE, La Quemada was largely abandoned. Why? No single explanation commands universal acceptance. Environmental pressures may have affected agriculture and resource availability. Shifts in trade networks could have undermined economic foundations. Political instability may have disrupted regional relationships. Population movements might have altered the balance of power. Each possibility carries weight. None provides complete certainty. The end of the settlement appears to have been part of broader transformations affecting northern and central Mexico during this period. Yet the precise sequence of events remains frustratingly unclear. The inhabitants departed. The plazas emptied. The stairways fell silent. And over time, nature reclaimed the hill. Centuries later, travelers encountered the ruins and wondered about their origin. Local traditions associated the site with legendary histories and forgotten peoples. The imposing architecture invited speculation. It still does. Modern archaeology has answered many questions, but not enough to eliminate the mystery. The scale of construction demonstrates organizational sophistication. The artifacts reveal long-distance connections. The architecture reflects both practical and symbolic concerns. A thriving community once flourished here, shaping stone and landscape into something monumental. Yet the deeper story remains incomplete. As evening shadows lengthen across the terraces and the ancient walls glow beneath the fading light. Lakomada seems caught between explanation and enigma. Its builders invested extraordinary effort into creating a center that dominated the surrounding hills. Their achievements remain visible after more than 1,000 years, but their intentions remain harder to grasp. Was this truly a fortress guarding a volatile frontier? A ceremonial center drawing people from distant communities? A powerful node within ancient trade networks? Or a place whose original purpose modern researchers have not yet fully understood? The stones offer clues. The landscape offers clues. The artifacts offer clues. And still, Lakomada keeps part of its story hidden, waiting patiently among the hills of Zacatecas for future discoveries that may, or may not, bring its deepest secrets into the light. Across a broad plain in northern Israel, a solitary mound rises above the surrounding farmland. At first glance, it appears unremarkable, just another hill among many. Yet beneath that mound lie the remains of more than 20 successive cities, built one atop another over thousands of years. This is Megiddo, a place so deeply woven into human history that its name eventually became associated with the end of the world itself. For archaeologists, Megiddo is one of the most important sites in the Near East. For historians, it is a crossroads where empires collided. And for many people, it remains forever linked to prophecy, mystery, and one of the most enduring symbols of apocalypse. Yet beneath the legends lies an even more fascinating reality. A city whose true story may be stranger than the myths that surround it. The importance of Megiddo begins with geography. The settlement occupied a strategic position overlooking the Jezreel Valley, one of the most important corridors in the ancient Near East. For thousands of years, armies, merchants, diplomats, and migrants passed through this region. Major routes connecting Egypt, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Levant converged nearby. Control Megiddo, and you influenced movement across an entire region. Lose it, and rivals could gain a decisive advantage. The location was so valuable that successive generations repeatedly rebuilt the city after destruction. Again, and again, and again. Each civilization inherited the same strategic prize. The earliest settlements appeared thousands of years before the rise of famous biblical kingdoms. During the Bronze Age, Megiddo grew into a major urban center surrounded by fortifications and monumental architecture. Palaces rose within its walls. Temples attracted worshippers. Administrative buildings managed resources and trade. The city prospered. Its rulers accumulated wealth. Its influence expanded. Archaeological excavations reveal a settlement deeply connected to wider networks, stretching across the eastern Mediterranean and beyond. Imported goods arrived from distant regions. Local elites displayed access to luxury items and foreign influences. Megiddo was not isolated. It was connected, extensively connected. One of the earliest historically documented battles occurred here. In the 15th century BCE, the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III led a military campaign into Canaan. Ancient inscriptions describe how he confronted a coalition of local rulers near Megiddo, in what many historians consider the first battle recorded in significant detail. The campaign succeeded. The city fell under Egyptian influence, and Megiddo entered written history. Even today, the account remains remarkable. It provides an unusually vivid glimpse into Bronze Age warfare, and demonstrates the strategic importance already attached to the city more than 3,000 years ago. Yet, military history is only part of the story. Megiddo also raises profound archaeological questions. The site became particularly famous during excavations conducted throughout the 20th century. Researchers uncovered layers representing different eras, each preserving clues about changing societies, technologies, and political systems. The mound itself became a kind of vertical timeline. Dig deeper. Travel farther into the past. Each layer tells a different story. One of the most debated discoveries involves a series of large stone structures, traditionally identified as stables. Some archaeologists argued that these buildings dated to the era of the biblical kings and were associated with the reign of Solomon. The interpretation attracted enormous attention. If correct, it would provide direct archaeological evidence connected to one of the most famous figures in biblical tradition. But not everyone agreed. Alternative interpretations emerged. Some researchers suggested the structures belonged to later periods. Others questioned whether they were stables at all. The debate continues, and it reflects a broader challenge facing archaeology in the region. Evidence rarely speaks for itself. Artifacts require interpretation. Interpretations invite disagreement. Certainty remains elusive. Water posed another challenge for ancient cities, especially during times of siege. Megiddo's inhabitants responded with extraordinary engineering. At some point during the Iron Age, builders created a sophisticated underground water system designed to provide secure access to a spring located outside the city walls. Workers excavated a deep shaft and a lengthy tunnel through bedrock, allowing residents to obtain water without exposing themselves to attackers. The achievement was remarkable. Even modern visitors descending into the tunnel often emerge impressed by the scale of the undertaking. Imagine the labor involved. Stone tools striking rock, workers hauling debris, engineers planning every angle, all completed without modern machinery. The system reflects not only technical skill, but also concern. A city invests in such projects when survival matters, when threats are real, when preparation can mean the difference between endurance and catastrophe. You stand atop the mound today and survey the valley below. Fields stretch across the landscape. Roads follow routes used for millennia. The strategic logic becomes immediately apparent. Armies would have passed this way. Caravans would have passed this way. Empires would have watched this place carefully. And many did. Egyptians, Canaanites, Israelites, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians. One power after another entered the story. Few locations witnessed such a succession of civilizations. Yet perhaps the greatest mystery associated with Megiddo emerged long after the city's political importance faded. The name became linked to apocalyptic tradition. The term Armageddon derives from a phrase often translated as Mountain of Megiddo or Hill of Megiddo. In later religious texts, the location became associated with a final cosmic confrontation between forces of good and evil. The symbolism proved powerful. For centuries, people imagined the site as the stage for events that had not yet occurred, a future battlefield, a place of ultimate reckoning. This association transformed Megiddo from an archaeological site into something larger, a cultural and spiritual symbol recognized across the world. Yet, the archaeological reality remains more complicated than the legend. The actual city was not a mythical battlefield waiting for the end of time. It was a living community, a place where ordinary people worked, traded, worshipped, governed, and survived. Its true history is rooted in human experience, and that history remains incomplete. Many questions endure. How exactly did political power function during different phases of the city's existence? What role did religion play in shaping urban life? How extensive were its international connections during periods of prosperity? And how many important structures still remain hidden beneath layers yet to be excavated? Megiddo continues to reveal new information even after more than a century of archaeological investigation. As evening settles across the Jezreel Valley, shadows spread over the ancient mound. Beneath the surface rest thousands of years of accumulated history, cities buried beneath cities, stories buried beneath stories. The armies are gone. The rulers are gone. The civilizations themselves have vanished. Yet Megiddo endures, a crossroads of empires, a symbol of prophecy, a puzzle still being assembled. And somewhere within its countless layers, hidden between history and legend, the city continues to guard secrets that may never be fully uncovered. North of the Sea of Galilee, amid rolling hills and fertile plains, rises one of the largest archaeological sites in the ancient Near East. Today, it appears as a broad mound scattered with ruins, broken walls, and weathered stones. Birds circle overhead. Grasses sway in the wind. At first glance, little suggests that this quiet landscape was once the center of a powerful kingdom. Yet thousands of years ago, Hazor dominated much of the region. Its influence extended across trade routes and political networks. Its rulers communicated with distant powers. Its merchants exchanged goods from lands hundreds of kilometers away. For centuries, Hazor stood among the greatest cities of the Levant. Then something happened. The city burned, and the mystery surrounding its destruction remains one of the most debated questions in Near Eastern archaeology. The story of Hazor begins long before the rise of the biblical kingdoms traditionally associated with the region. During the Middle and Late Bronze Ages, roughly between 2000 and 1200 BCE, Hazor developed into an enormous urban center. Its size alone was extraordinary. At its peak, the city covered a vast area, far larger than many neighboring settlements. Thousands of people lived within and around its fortifications. Monumental buildings lined important districts. Administrative centers coordinated political and economic activity. Hazor was not merely another city. It was a regional capital. Archaeological discoveries confirm its importance. Ancient texts found elsewhere in the Near East mention Hazor repeatedly, indicating that foreign rulers recognized its significance. Correspondence from major kingdoms refers to the city and its leaders. Such references reveal a settlement deeply integrated into the diplomatic world of the Bronze Age. Hazor occupied a strategic location. Trade routes connecting Egypt, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Mediterranean passed through the broader region. Merchants transported metals, textiles, luxury goods, agricultural products, and ideas. Cities positioned along these networks often accumulated wealth and influence. Hazor excelled at this. Its prosperity was visible in its architecture. Excavations uncovered palaces featuring impressive construction techniques. Temples contained elaborate decorative elements. Administrative buildings reflected the complexity of governance required to manage a large urban population. The city projected power, and power leaves traces. One of the most remarkable discoveries involves a series of monumental structures that reveal connections to broader cultural traditions across the ancient Near East. Architectural styles, imported goods, and artistic influences demonstrate that Hazor was part of an interconnected world. This was not an isolated frontier settlement. It was a participant in international affairs. Imagine arriving at Hazor during its height. The city gates loom ahead. Merchants enter carrying goods from distant regions. Officials oversee transactions. Artisans produce ceramics, tools, and luxury objects. Priests conduct rituals within temples. Diplomats arrive bearing messages from foreign courts. The streets are crowded. The markets are active. The city feels confident, secure, permanent. Yet permanence can be an illusion. Around the end of the Late Bronze Age, Hazor experienced a catastrophic destruction. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of intense fire across significant portions of the site. Buildings collapsed. Valuable objects were abandoned. Entire districts suffered devastation. The destruction was severe, and it became one of the central mysteries of the city. Who destroyed Hazor? The question sounds simple. The answer is not. Some researchers associate the event with the broader collapse that affected many societies across the eastern Mediterranean around the 12th century BCE. During this turbulent era, kingdoms fell, trade networks fragmented, and long-established political systems unraveled. Hazor was not alone. Many major centers experienced disruption, yet the specific circumstances remain uncertain. Other interpretations focus on local conflicts, internal unrest, or changing regional dynamics. Some scholars connect the destruction to events later preserved in biblical traditions. Others argue that the archaeological evidence cannot support such definitive conclusions. The debate continues, decade after decade. Each new discovery adds information while raising new questions. One particularly intriguing aspect concerns the destruction of religious statues and sacred objects found within the ruins. Certain artifacts appear deliberately damaged. Some researchers interpret this as evidence of ideological or religious conflict accompanying the city's fall. But interpretation remains difficult. Were the objects intentionally destroyed? Did they break during the collapse of buildings? Can motives truly be reconstructed after more than 3,000 years? Archaeology often confronts such uncertainties. The evidence speaks, but rarely with complete clarity. After the destruction, Hazor did not disappear entirely. Later, communities reoccupied portions of the site. During the Iron Age, new fortifications, gates, and public works appeared. The city entered another chapter of its history, one associated with emerging political entities in the region. Among the most famous discoveries from this period is a massive gate complex. Its construction demonstrates significant organizational capacity and engineering skill. The structure became central to debates regarding chronology and state formation in the ancient Levant. Again, interpretations differ. Again, certainty proves elusive. Hazor seems almost destined to generate controversy. Even its water systems contribute to the story. Like many important ancient cities, Hazor invested heavily in securing reliable access to water. Engineers excavated an enormous underground system, allowing inhabitants to reach water sources while remaining protected during periods of conflict. The scale is impressive. Descending into the system today, you encounter a space carved through rock by workers who lived thousands of years ago. Every step reflects labor, planning, and determination. Such projects reveal something important about Hazor. Its inhabitants expected challenges. They prepared for uncertainty. They understood that survival often depended upon foresight. Yet despite these preparations, the city still faced destruction. You stand upon the mound today and look across the surrounding landscape. The hills remain. The roots of movement remain. The strategic advantages that attracted settlers thousands of years ago remain. The city itself does not. Only fragments survive. Walls, foundations, artifacts, clues. Enough to reconstruct portions of the story, not enough to complete it. And perhaps that incompleteness is what makes Hazor so compelling. It was once among the most powerful cities in the region, Its rulers participated in international politics. Its merchants engaged in long-distance trade. Its temples hosted rituals now forgotten. Then a catastrophe transformed everything. The reasons remain debated. The perpetrators remain uncertain. The full sequence of events remains hidden within the gaps of history. As twilight settles over the ancient mound, the ruins seem suspended between revelation and mystery. Hazur has yielded extraordinary discoveries, yet some of its most important secrets continue to resist explanation. Who truly brought down this great city? What forces reshaped the region during its final days of power? And how many answers still lie buried beneath the unexcavated portions of one of the ancient world's most influential and most enigmatic urban centers? At the southern edge of the Jutland Peninsula, where narrow waterways connect the North Sea and the Baltic, the remains of an ancient settlement lie beneath grassy fields and gentle slopes. To modern eyes, the landscape appears peaceful. Sheep graze near old earthworks. The wind moves across the shoreline. Nothing immediately suggests that this quiet place was once one of the busiest trading centers in northern Europe. Yet more than 1,000 years ago, Hedeby stood at the heart of a vast commercial network stretching across continents. Merchants arrived from distant lands. Ships crowded its harbor. Silver changed hands. Languages mixed. Ideas traveled. For a brief but remarkable period, this settlement became one of the most important crossroads of the Viking world. And despite extensive archaeological research, many mysteries surrounding Hedeby remain unresolved. The site flourished between the 8th and 11th centuries CE, during an era often associated with Viking expansion. Popular imagination frequently focuses on raiders and warriors crossing stormy seas. But the Viking Age was also an age of commerce, diplomacy, craftsmanship, and cultural exchange. Hedeby embodied that reality. Located near a narrow land corridor linking major waterways, the settlement occupied one of the most strategically valuable positions in northern Europe. Goods moving between the Baltic and the North Sea could pass through this region far more efficiently than by navigating longer maritime routes. Geography created opportunity, and opportunity attracted people. Soon, merchants from many different regions converged on the settlement. Scandinavians arrived from the north. Slavic traders came from the east. Franks traveled from the south. Others journeyed from even farther away. Archaeological discoveries revealed just how extensive these connections became. Artifacts originating in distant parts of Europe, the Middle East, and beyond have been uncovered at the site. Coins minted hundreds or thousands of kilometers away eventually found their way into Hedeby's markets. The settlement became a meeting place, a hub, a gateway between worlds. At its height, Hedeby was surrounded by substantial defenses. One of the most striking features of the site is the massive semicircular earthwork that enclosed much of the settlement. Combined with broader regional fortifications, these defenses created a formidable barrier against potential threats. The scale of construction is impressive. Thousands of workers would have been required. Planning would have been essential. Leadership would have been necessary. Such projects rarely emerge without significant organization. This immediately raises questions. Who controlled Hedeby? Who coordinated these efforts? And how centralized was political authority during the settlement's most prosperous years? The answers remain uncertain. Historical sources mention rulers associated with the region, but the precise relationship between political power and daily life within Hedeby continues to be debated. The archaeological evidence paints a picture of remarkable complexity. Excavations have uncovered workshops where artisans produced jewelry, tools, weapons, and decorative objects. Craftspeople worked with iron, bone, wood, glass, and precious metals. Specialized production occurred on a scale suggesting significant demand. The settlement was not merely a place where goods passed through, it was also a place where goods were created. Skilled labor thrived here. Innovation thrived here. Economic activity flourished. Imagine entering Hedeby during the height of its prosperity. The harbor is crowded with vessels of varying sizes. Sailors unload cargo from distant regions. Merchants negotiate prices. Artisans hammer metal inside busy workshops. Livestock move through the streets. The air carries the sounds of conversation in multiple languages. Everywhere there is movement. Everywhere there is exchange. The settlement feels alive. Yet life in Hedeby was not entirely peaceful. Its wealth made it attractive. Its strategic position made it vulnerable. Powerful neighbors recognized its value, and valuable places often become targets. Historical accounts and archaeological evidence indicate that the settlement experienced periods of conflict. Defenses were strengthened. Political rivalries shaped events. Competing interests struggled for influence over the region. The Viking world was interconnected, but it was also competitive. Control of trade routes could generate enormous advantages. One particularly fascinating aspect of Hedeby involves the diversity of its population. Archaeological discoveries suggest that people from numerous cultural backgrounds lived, worked, and traded there. Objects reflecting different traditions appear throughout the site. This diversity challenges simplistic views of the Viking Age. Hedeby was not culturally isolated. It was cosmopolitan. Visitors and residents encountered foreign customs, unfamiliar languages, and distant ideas on a regular basis. Few places in Northern Europe were more internationally connected. Religion adds another layer of intrigue. During Hedeby's existence, Northern Europe underwent profound spiritual transformations. Traditional Norse beliefs coexisted, competed, and interacted with Christianity. Missionaries traveled through the region. Political leaders adopted new faiths. Communities navigated changing religious landscapes. Archaeological evidence reflects this complexity. Certain discoveries suggest Christian influences. Others point toward older traditions. The transition was not instantaneous, nor was it necessarily uniform. People likely responded in different ways. Some embraced change. Others resisted. Many may have blended traditions in ways that are difficult to reconstruct today. Without extensive written records from ordinary inhabitants, much remains speculative. You stand near the remains of the harbor and look across the water. It is easy to understand why this place mattered. The surrounding geography channels movement naturally. Trade routes converge. Resources flow through the region. The strategic logic remains visible even after 1,000 years. Yet Hedeby's success was not permanent. During the 11th century, the settlement entered a period of decline. Conflict appears to have played a role. Political transformations altered regional dynamics. Trade patterns shifted. New centers emerged elsewhere. The exact combination of factors remains debated. What is clear is that the bustling hub eventually lost its dominance. The harbor quieted. Workshops closed. Population declined. And over time, the settlement was abandoned. Nature slowly reclaimed the site. Buildings collapsed. Wood decayed. Earth covered the remnants of centuries of activity. For generations, The once thriving center faded into memory. Only archaeology would bring it back. Modern excavations transformed understanding of both Hedeby and the Viking Age itself. Discoveries revealed a society far more interconnected and economically sophisticated than earlier stereotypes suggested. Trade, craftsmanship, and cultural exchange emerged as central themes. Yet important mysteries remain. How extensive were Hedeby's connections with distant regions? How did different cultural groups interact on a daily basis? What political arrangements sustained such a dynamic center? And why did a settlement so successful ultimately fail to endure? As evening settles over the old harbor and shadows lengthen across the ancient earthworks, Hedeby remains suspended between history and mystery. The artifacts tell stories of merchants, artisans, travelers, and rulers whose lives intersected at this remarkable crossroads, but only fragments survive. The voices are gone. The ships are gone. The city itself has vanished. And somewhere beneath the fields, among the remains of workshops, homes, and forgotten streets, Hedeby continues to guard secrets from one of the most transformative eras in northern European history. On the eastern bank of the Nile, in a broad desert bay surrounded by cliffs, lies the remains of a city unlike any other in ancient Egypt. Its streets were carefully planned. Its temples were built with extraordinary speed. Its palaces once housed one of history's most controversial rulers. And yet the city existed for only a brief moment, a few decades, barely a generation. Then it was abandoned, its monuments dismantled, its memory deliberately erased. Today, the ruins are known as Amarna, but during its short and dramatic life, it bore another name, Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. It was the creation of a king determined to transform the spiritual foundations of an entire civilization. Whether he succeeded remains one of the great mysteries of ancient Egypt. The story begins in the 14th century BCE, during the reign of Akhenaten, a ruler whose actions continue to divide historians and archaeologists. Before ascending the throne, he was known as Amenhotep IV, a prince born into one of Egypt's most powerful royal dynasties. At the time, Egypt stood near the height of its influence. Its armies projected power across the Near East. Its temples accumulated enormous wealth. Its religious institutions shaped nearly every aspect of life. The gods of Egypt had been worshipped for centuries. Their traditions were deeply rooted. Their priesthoods were influential. Then Akhenaten introduced something radically different. Rather than honoring the traditional pantheon, he elevated a solar deity known as the Aten to unprecedented prominence. The Aten had existed previously within Egyptian religion, but Akhenaten transformed its status dramatically. Temples dedicated to other gods lost favor. Traditional religious practices were disrupted. The king promoted devotion centered on the solar disk. The change was extraordinary. Some scholars have described it as one of history's earliest experiments with a form of monotheism, though the exact nature of Atenism remains debated. What is clear is that Akhenaten sought to reshape Egyptian religion on a scale rarely attempted by any ruler. And to support this transformation, he created a new capital, a city built from scratch, a city unlike any that had come before. The chosen location lay in a relatively undeveloped stretch of desert. Boundary stelae carved into surrounding cliffs proclaimed the sacred significance of the site. According to royal inscriptions, the king selected the location because it belonged to no god, no ruler, and no previous tradition. It would be a fresh beginning, a sacred horizon, a physical manifestation of a new religious vision. Construction began with astonishing speed. Within only a few years, a vast urban center emerged from the desert. Palaces rose along broad avenues. Administrative buildings appeared. Residential districts expanded. Temples dedicated to the Aten dominated the landscape. Thousands of workers participated in the effort. Stone was quarried, mud brick walls multiplied. Artisans decorated structures. Officials relocated from older cities. The transformation was remarkable. Imagine arriving at Amarna during its peak. The city gleams beneath the Egyptian sun. Open courtyards reflect a new architectural style, emphasizing light and visibility. Priests conduct rituals beneath the open sky rather than within the dark sanctuaries characteristic of earlier temples. Everything feels different, deliberately different. The art of Amarna reveals this shift perhaps more clearly than anything else. For centuries, Egyptian royal art followed highly formalized conventions. Kings appeared idealized and timeless. Figures were depicted according to strict artistic rules. Then came the Amarna style. Suddenly, royal images became more unusual. Bodies appeared elongated. Features became exaggerated. Scenes portrayed intimate moments between members of the royal family. Akhenaten, his queen Nefertiti, and their daughters appeared in ways that would have seemed startling to earlier generations. The reasons remain controversial. Were these artistic choices symbolic, religious, political? Did they reflect reality or ideology? No consensus exists. Even after decades of study, the art of Amarna continues to provoke debate. Yet the city offers something even more valuable than monumental architecture or unusual artwork. It offers a snapshot of daily life. Because Amarna existed for such a short period, archaeologists can examine a community frozen within a relatively narrow moment of history. Excavations uncovered homes, workshops, administrative records, and cemeteries, providing extraordinary insight into ordinary people, not just kings, not just priests, common residents, workers, craftsmen, families. Their lives emerge through the archaeological record with remarkable clarity. Yet this evidence also reveals a less glamorous reality. Some studies suggest that many inhabitants experienced difficult living conditions. Skeletal remains indicate signs of physical stress, disease, and demanding labor. The magnificent royal vision may have imposed significant burdens on the population responsible for constructing and maintaining the city. This contrast is striking. A city built to celebrate divine harmony, a population that may have endured hardship. The gap between ideology and reality remains difficult to measure. Then came the collapse. Akhenaten died, and everything changed. Within a relatively short time, the religious revolution began to unravel. Traditional beliefs regained prominence. Royal successors distanced themselves from Atenism. The court eventually relocated elsewhere. Amarna lost its purpose. Its reason for existing vanished. The city was abandoned. Buildings deteriorated. Stone blocks were removed and reused in later construction projects. Official efforts sought to erase the memory of Akhenaten and his experiment. Names were removed. Monuments were altered. References disappeared from many records. It was an attempt at historical deletion, a campaign against memory itself. And yet, it failed. Enough survived. Enough remained hidden beneath the sand. Enough endured for archaeology to rediscover the city thousands of years later. You stand among the ruins today and look toward the cliffs marking the ancient boundaries of Akhenaten's vision. The streets are empty. The temples are broken. The palaces exist only as fragments. Yet the questions remain. What truly motivated Akhenaten's revolution? Religious conviction, political strategy, personal belief, some combination of all three. And why did such an ambitious project collapse so quickly after his death? As the sun descends toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Amarna feels suspended between certainty and mystery. More is known about this city than many ancient settlements. Its buildings, texts, and artifacts have revealed extraordinary details, and still, its deepest secrets remain elusive. For a brief moment, one ruler attempted to reshape an entire civilization. The city he built still stands as evidence of that dream, but whether it was a visionary experiment, a political gamble, or something far more complex may never be fully understood. Along the fertile plains of Pakistan's Sindh province, where the Indus River system has shaped human settlement for thousands of years, a rocky ridge rises above the surrounding landscape. Atop that ridge stand the remains of a later fortress, visible from a considerable distance. Yet beneath and around it lies something far older, something far more mysterious. An ancient settlement that existed before one of the world's earliest urban civilizations reached its full maturity. A settlement that may hold crucial clues to how cities first emerged in the Indus Valley. The site is known as Kot Diji, and, although it rarely receives the attention given to famous locations such as Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, its importance to archaeology is difficult to overstate. For Kot Diji occupies a fascinating position in history. It stands at the threshold between village life and urban civilization, a bridge between two worlds. The earliest occupation at the site dates back to the 4th millennium BCE, centuries before the Indus civilization reached its peak. During this period, communities across the region were undergoing profound transformations. Agriculture had already become well established. Trade networks were expanding. Populations were growing. Yet true cities had not fully emerged. Not yet. The world of Kot Diji existed during a time of transition, a time when social complexity was increasing, but the great urban centers of the Indus Valley still lay in the future. This alone makes the site remarkable. Archaeologists often focus on mature civilizations because their achievements are dramatic and visible. Monumental architecture attracts attention. Large cities capture imagination. Written systems and sophisticated infrastructure provide obvious evidence of complexity. But the path leading to such developments is often more difficult to reconstruct. How does a civilization become a civilization? How do scattered communities evolve into urban societies? Kot Diji offers rare insights into those questions. Excavations revealed a settlement already displaying signs of organization and planning. Houses were constructed using mud bricks. Streets followed recognizable patterns. Defensive structures protected portions of the community. The settlement was not chaotic. It was structured, deliberately structured, and that detail matters. Urbanization rarely appears suddenly. It usually emerges through gradual changes occurring over generations. Communities experiment with new forms of organization. Economic relationships become more complex. Population density increases. Political authority evolves. Kot Diji appears to capture part of that process. One of the most significant discoveries involves the site's fortifications. A substantial defensive wall surrounded part of the settlement. Its construction required labor, planning, and coordination. Such projects imply leadership capable of organizing collective effort. The wall raises immediate questions. What threat required protection? Conflict with neighboring communities. Competition over resources. concerns about security in an increasingly populated landscape. The evidence remains inconclusive, yet the very existence of fortifications suggests a society already confronting challenges associated with growth and complexity. Inside the settlement, archaeologists uncovered pottery unlike anything previously known from the region. The ceramics displayed distinctive styles and decorative patterns that eventually became associated with what scholars now call the Côte d'Ivoire phase. This cultural phase occupies a critical position in Indus Valley history. Its artifacts appear across a broad geographic area, indicating connections between different communities. Similar pottery styles emerged at multiple sites, suggesting increasing interaction and shared cultural practices. Ideas were spreading, techniques were spreading, perhaps identities were spreading as well. The people of Côte d'Ivoire were not isolated villagers living independently from one another. They belonged to a larger world, a world becoming more interconnected with each passing generation. Imagine arriving at the settlement around 3000 BCE. The defensive wall dominates part of the landscape. Houses cluster together within organized districts. Farmers cultivate surrounding fields. Potters shape clay vessels using techniques refined over generations. Traders arrive carrying goods from distant communities. The settlement feels active, purposeful, growing. No one living there could have known that the region was moving toward one of humanity's earliest urban revolutions. Yet the signs were already emerging. Trade provides another important clue. Artifacts discovered at Côte d'Ivoire indicate participation in exchange networks extending beyond the immediate area. Raw materials and manufactured goods moved between communities. Such interactions encouraged specialization, cooperation, and innovation. Economic connections create opportunities. They also create dependencies. As networks expand, societies become increasingly linked to one another. The Indus civilization would eventually develop some of the most extensive trade systems of the ancient world. Côte d'Ivoire may represent an early stage in that evolution. Yet perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the site concerns what happened next. At some point, evidence suggests that portions of the settlement experienced destruction by fire. Burned layers have been identified in excavations. The cause remains uncertain. Accidental fires were common in ancient settlements, but deliberate destruction cannot be ruled out. Conflict, internal unrest, catastrophe. Archaeology has not provided definitive answers. The burned remains simply mark a dramatic moment in the site's history, a moment frozen within the archaeological record, and one that continues to invite speculation. Afterward, occupation continued. The region moved increasingly toward the mature phase of the Indus civilization. Great cities eventually emerged across the broader landscape. Urban planning became more sophisticated. Standardized weights, extensive trade networks, and large population centers appeared. Civilization accelerated. Côte d'Ivoire became part of that larger story. Yet it remains especially valuable because it preserves evidence from before the urban flowering reached its height. It reveals the foundations, the experiments, the gradual transformations often hidden beneath later achievements. You stand at the site today and look across the plains. The landscape appears timeless. Fields stretch toward the horizon. Villages dot the countryside. The remains of ancient walls emerge from the earth. The setting feels peaceful. Yet beneath the soil lies evidence of one of history's most important transitions, a period when communities were discovering new ways to organize themselves, new ways to cooperate, new ways to build, and perhaps new ways to wield power. But many mysteries endure. What political structures governed the settlement? Who organized the construction of its defenses? Why did the destructive fire occur? And how exactly did communities like Kot Diji contribute to the emergence of the great Indus cities that followed? Archaeologists continue searching for answers. Each excavation reveals another fragment, another clue, another possibility. Yet the full picture remains incomplete. As evening settles across the Sind plains and shadows lengthen over the ancient remains, Kot Diji stands as a reminder that the origins of civilization are rarely simple. The great cities of the Indus Valley did not appear overnight. They emerged from places like this, places where change was already underway, places where the future was taking shape, and places whose deepest secrets may still lie hidden beneath the earth, waiting to reveal how one of humanity's earliest urban worlds truly began. Across the flat limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula, where dense vegetation conceals traces of countless ancient settlements, lies a city that once stood at the center of a thriving Maya world. Today, its ruins appear scattered across the landscape. Stone foundations emerge from the earth. Ancient roads vanish into the forest. A solitary temple rises above the trees. At first glance, Zibil Chaltun may seem less dramatic than some of the towering Maya cities that dominate popular imagination. There are no pyramids reaching extraordinary heights, no massive acropolises dominating the horizon, no endless rows of monumental temples. Yet appearances can be deceptive. For Zibil Chaltun was one of the largest and longest-lived Maya cities ever built, and despite decades of research, many aspects of its history remain surprisingly mysterious. The name Zibil Chaltun is often translated as something resembling place where writing is on flat stones, though the exact meaning remains debated. The ancient inhabitants themselves likely knew the city by another name, one lost to time. That lost name is only the beginning. Many details about the city's political history remain uncertain. Unlike some Maya centers with extensive hieroglyphic records documenting rulers and dynasties, Zibil Chaltun has revealed fewer written clues. The city speaks, but often through architecture rather than text, through roads rather than inscriptions, through patterns rather than names. The settlement's origins stretch deep into the past. Occupation began long before many of the great classic Maya cities reached prominence. Over centuries, the population grew steadily. By the height of its development, Zibil Chaltun covered an enormous area. Some estimates suggest tens of thousands of people lived within and around the city. Perhaps more. The scale is astonishing. Rather than concentrating all activity within a dense urban core, the settlement spread across the landscape. Residential structures, ceremonial spaces, and public buildings occupied a vast territory, connected by a network of raised roads known as Sakbiab. These roads remain among the most fascinating features of the site. Constructed from limestone and elevated above the surrounding terrain, they linked important locations across the city. Some extended for considerable distances, creating physical connections between different districts. The effort required was immense. Workers quarried stone, transported materials, leveled surfaces, maintained routes. Such infrastructure reflects careful planning and long-term investment. It also suggests something important about the society that built it: organization, coordination, shared purpose. Cities do not create such networks accidentally. One of the most famous structures at Zibil Chaltun is the Temple of the Seven Dolls. The name originated from a curious archaeological discovery. During excavations, researchers found 7 small clay figurines within the structure. Their purpose remains uncertain. They may have held ritual significance. They may have represented deities, ancestors, or symbolic concepts. No definitive explanation exists. The mystery persists. The temple itself occupies a special position within the city. During the equinoxes, the rising sun aligns dramatically with its doorways, creating a striking visual effect. Light passes through the structure with remarkable precision. Was this intentional? Most researchers believe so. Ancient Maya architects possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Across the Maya world, buildings frequently reflect careful observations of celestial events. The alignment at Zibil Chaltun appears unlikely to be coincidental, yet certainty remains elusive. The builders left no instructions, no explanations, only stone, only geometry, only the enduring relationship between architecture and the sky. Imagine standing before the temple more than 1,000 years ago. The horizon begins to brighten. Crowds gather nearby. The first rays of sunlight emerge and pass directly through the structure. For those witnessing the event, the alignment may have carried profound symbolic meaning, a connection between heaven and earth, between cycles of nature and human existence, between the visible world and something beyond it. What exactly that meaning was remains unknown. Water played a crucial role in the city's survival. The Yucatan Peninsula lacks many of the large rivers found in other regions. Instead, access to fresh water often depended upon natural sinkholes known as cenotes. Zibil Chaltun possessed one of the most important. The Ixtlaca cenote provided a reliable source of water throughout much of the city's history. Deep and expansive, it supported both practical and ceremonial activities. Archaeologists discovered artifacts within its waters, including pottery and other objects likely associated with ritual practices. Such discoveries are not surprising. Across the Maya world, cenotes often carried spiritual significance. They were viewed as places connected to supernatural realms, gateways linking the human world with forces beyond ordinary experience. The distinction between practical necessity and sacred meaning may not have existed in the way modern observers expect. Water sustained life. Water inspired reverence. Water became sacred. Trade also contributed to the city's prosperity. Its location near the northern coast of the Yucatan facilitated connections with other communities. Goods moved across land and sea routes linking distant regions. Salt, obsidian, ceramics, textiles, and countless other products circulated through these networks. Zibil Chaltun was not isolated. Far from it. It participated in broader systems of exchange that connected much of the Maya world. Economic activity supported population growth. Population growth supported urban development. The city flourished for centuries. Yet, like many ancient centers, Zibil Chaltun eventually experienced decline. The reasons remain debated. Environmental pressures may have contributed. Political transformations elsewhere in the region may have altered trade patterns. Social changes could have weakened existing institutions. Population shifts may have reshaped the landscape. No single explanation satisfies every question. The process appears complex, gradual, multifaceted. By the time European explorers arrived in the broader region, the city had long ceased to function as the thriving center it once was. Its buildings deteriorated, vegetation spread, memory faded, the forest advanced, yet traces endured. You stand among the ruins today and look across the landscape. The remains seem modest at first, then the scale becomes apparent. Roads extend into the distance. Foundations emerge from beneath the trees. The city reveals itself gradually, piece by piece, clue by clue. The longer you look, the larger it becomes. And so do the mysteries. Who ruled Jibil Chaltun during its greatest period of prosperity? What ceremonies unfolded within the Temple of the Seven Dolls? Why were the 7 figurines placed there? How did ordinary residents understand the celestial alignments that still fascinate observers today? And what forces ultimately transformed one of the Maya world's largest urban centers into a silent collection of ruins? As the sun sinks toward the horizon and shadows stretch across the limestone plain, Jibil Chaltun remains suspended between discovery and uncertainty. Archaeologists have uncovered remarkable evidence of a sophisticated and enduring society. Yet much of the city's story remains unwritten, hidden within collapsed structures, buried beneath layers of earth, or perhaps lost forever. And somewhere among its ancient roads and sacred spaces, the forgotten city continues to guard secrets from a world that vanished centuries ago. In the remote landscapes of southeastern Mauritania, where rocky plateaus overlook vast stretches of the Sahara, the remains of an ancient civilization lie scattered across the desert. Stone settlements cling to escarpments. Collapsed walls emerge from the sand. Silent foundations trace the outlines of communities that flourished thousands of years ago in a region that now seems inhospitable to large-scale settlement. At first glance, the setting feels improbable. The modern Sahara is often associated with extremes: endless dunes, scorching temperatures, scarce water. Yet this landscape was not always so harsh. Long ago, it was different. Greener, more hospitable, more alive. And within that changing environment, the people of Tichet built one of the earliest known complex societies in West Africa. Their achievements remain remarkable. Their history remains incomplete, and their disappearance continues to raise profound questions. The story begins more than 4,000 years ago. During this period, parts of the Sahara were undergoing dramatic environmental transformations. Earlier millennia had been wetter. Lakes dotted the landscape. Grasslands supported wildlife and human communities. Over time, however, climatic conditions shifted. The desert expanded. Water became less predictable. Life adapted, or moved. Yet some communities responded in another way. They organized. They built. They created settlements designed to endure. The Tichet tradition emerged within this context. Named after the region where many of its sites were first identified, this cultural complex developed between roughly 2200 and 200 BCE. Archaeologists have documented hundreds of stone settlements across the area, revealing a society far more sophisticated than many once imagined. The sheer number of sites is astonishing. From the air, traces of ancient occupation appear across broad portions of the landscape. Stone walls define residential compounds. Enclosures mark areas used for various purposes. Settlements occupy elevated positions that offer commanding views of the surrounding terrain. Nothing about these communities appears temporary. They were built to last. And many did. The use of stone is one reason the archaeological record remains so impressive. While structures made from wood or mud brick often deteriorate rapidly, stone walls can survive for millennia. As a result, the settlements of Tichet continue to shape the landscape long after their builders disappeared. The architecture reveals careful planning. Residential areas were organized. Defensive considerations appear evident. Space was managed deliberately. This was not random construction. It was community design. The settlements suggest populations capable of cooperation, labor coordination, and long-term planning. Such qualities are often associated with increasingly complex social systems. Yet Tichit presents a puzzle. How did complexity emerge in a region many people assume could not support it? Part of the answer lies in the environment of the time. Conditions were challenging, but not identical to those of the modern Sahara. Communities practiced agriculture and animal husbandry. Evidence indicates the cultivation of crops, including pearl millet, one of the earliest known examples of cereal agriculture in West Africa. This detail is enormously significant. Agriculture changes societies. Reliable food production allows populations to grow. It encourages settlement. It creates opportunities for specialization and trade. It supports increasingly sophisticated social structures. The people of Tichit appear to have understood these possibilities. They invested in them. Imagine approaching one of these settlements during its height. Stone compounds spread across the plateau. Farmers work nearby fields. Herds of livestock move through the surrounding landscape. Families carry out daily tasks within carefully organized residential areas. Smoke rises from hearths. Voices echo between stone walls. The community feels established, permanent, confident, far removed from stereotypes of isolated desert existence. Trade likely contributed to this prosperity. Although the precise extent of commercial networks remains debated, archaeological evidence suggests interaction between different communities across considerable distances. Goods, materials, and ideas circulated through the region. The Sahara was not always a barrier. Often, it functioned as a bridge. People moved across it. Knowledge moved across it. Influences moved across it. Tichit occupied part of that dynamic world. One of the most fascinating aspects of the archaeological record involves social organization. Differences in settlement size and layout suggest the existence of hierarchy. Certain sites appear more prominent than others. Some structures may have held special status within their communities. This raises important questions. Were there local elites, chiefs, religious leaders, emerging forms of centralized authority? The evidence hints at complexity, but stops short of providing definitive answers. No written records survive. The people of Tichit left stones rather than texts, architecture rather than chronicles. As a result, much must be inferred, and inference always leaves room for uncertainty. The environmental story becomes increasingly important as time progresses. The Sahara continued to grow drier. Water sources became less reliable. Agricultural opportunities contracted. Communities faced mounting challenges. How exactly they responded remains one of the great mysteries of the region. Some settlements were abandoned, others persisted. Population movements likely occurred. Groups may have migrated southward toward more favorable environments. Many researchers believe these migrations influenced later cultural developments elsewhere in West Africa. If true, the significance of Tichit extends far beyond its immediate geography. Its legacy may have traveled with the people themselves, carried through generations, transmitted across landscapes. Yet tracing such connections is difficult. The archaeological record becomes fragmentary. Certainty fades. Possibilities multiply. You stand among the ruins today and look across the plateau. The view stretches toward the horizon. The silence feels immense. Wind moves through the stones. The desert appears timeless, but it is not. The landscape has changed repeatedly. Entire worlds have come and gone. The settlements around you are evidence of one of them. A world in which communities flourished where many modern observers would least expect it. A world of farmers, herders, builders, and traders whose accomplishments remained largely unrecognized for centuries. And still, fundamental questions remain unanswered. How large were the populations inhabiting these settlements? What political systems governed them? How extensive were their trade connections? What beliefs guided their daily lives? And how did they navigate the environmental transformations that ultimately reshaped the Sahara itself? As evening shadows lengthen across the ancient stone walls, Tikrit remains suspended between revelation and mystery. Archaeology has demonstrated that complex societies flourished here thousands of years ago, challenging assumptions about the history of West Africa and the Sahara. Yet the deeper story remains elusive. The stones endure. The people do not. And somewhere beneath the desert sands, hidden among hundreds of forgotten settlements, may lie the clues needed to understand one of Africa's earliest and most enigmatic civilizations. On the southern edge of the Sahara, where vast desert routes once converged with the fertile lands of West Africa, the remains of a forgotten city lie scattered across the landscape. Low stone foundations emerge from the earth. Broken walls trace the outlines of long-vanished buildings. Centuries of wind have softened the edges of what was once one of the most important urban centers in Africa. Today, the site appears quiet, almost insignificant. Yet more than 1,000 years ago, Kumbi Saleh stood at the center of a kingdom whose wealth astonished travelers from distant lands, a kingdom built on gold, a kingdom connected to continents, a kingdom whose true history remains partly hidden behind fragments of evidence and the accounts of outsiders. For Kumbi Saleh is widely believed to be associated with the capital of the ancient Ghana Empire, one of the great powers of medieval Africa. And despite decades of archaeological research, many mysteries surrounding the city continue to endure. The Ghana Empire emerged centuries before the rise of many later West African states. Flourishing roughly between the 8th and 13th centuries CE, it controlled key trade routes crossing the Western Sahara. Through these routes flowed commodities of immense value. Gold moved northward, salt moved southward. Along with them traveled textiles, metals, ideas, technologies, and people. Trade transformed the region. And Kumbi Saleh appears to have been one of its greatest beneficiaries. The city's strategic location positioned it near important commercial corridors, linking North Africa with the savannas farther south. Camel caravans crossed the desert carrying goods between worlds that might otherwise have remained separated by thousands of kilometers of harsh terrain. The Sahara was formidable, but it was not impassable. For skilled traders, it became a highway, and Kumbi Saleh became one of its major destinations. Much of what historians know about the city comes from medieval Arabic writers who described the wealth and influence of the Ghana Empire. Among the most famous was al-Bakri, who wrote detailed accounts in the 11th century, based on information gathered from merchants and travelers. His descriptions were remarkable. He portrayed a prosperous kingdom whose rulers possessed substantial power and resources. Gold appeared frequently in these accounts. So did references to organized administration, trade, and impressive urban life. Yet there is an important complication. Al-Bakri never visited the city himself. His writings relied upon second-hand information. This does not make them worthless. Far from it. But it means questions remain. How accurate were the descriptions? How much was misunderstood? How much has been lost? Archaeology helps bridge some of these gaps. Excavations at Kumbi Saleh revealed evidence of a substantial urban settlement. Stone-built structures, residential areas, and traces of commercial activity suggest a thriving community that participated in extensive regional and international exchange. The architecture itself is significant. In a region where many ancient buildings were constructed from materials that deteriorate over time, the surviving stone remains offer valuable insights into urban development and social organization. The city was not a temporary encampment. It was permanent, established, sophisticated. One of the most intriguing aspects of the historical accounts involves the possibility that Kumbi Saleh consisted of two distinct sections. According to descriptions, one area was associated with the royal court and local traditions, while another housed merchants, many of whom practiced Islam. Whether this division existed exactly as described remains debated. Archaeological evidence provides some support for cultural diversity within the settlement. Evidence of Islamic influence appears alongside indications of local traditions and practices. The city may have functioned as a meeting point between different worlds, different religions, different languages, different economic systems. If so, Kumbi Saleh was more than a political capital. It was a crossroads of civilizations. Imagine arriving there during its peak. A caravan emerges from the Sahara after weeks of travel. Camels carry salt slabs, textiles, and imported goods. Traders enter the city and encounter bustling markets filled with merchants from multiple regions. Negotiations begin. News spreads. Goods change hands. Everywhere there is movement. Everywhere there is exchange. The city feels connected to distant places most of its inhabitants will never see. And yet, those distant places influence daily life. This interconnectedness helps explain the wealth associated with the Ghana Empire. Gold played a central role. West Africa possessed some of the richest gold resources in the medieval world. Demand for the metal extended across North Africa, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Control over trade routes allowed rulers to benefit enormously from this demand. Gold generated power. Gold attracted merchants. Gold attracted rivals. And therein lies another mystery. How exactly did the rulers of Ghana maintain authority over such extensive commercial networks? The available evidence suggests a combination of political organization, strategic geography, and economic influence. Yet the precise mechanisms remain unclear. No local written records survive to explain the kingdom's administration in detail. The voices of its rulers are largely absent. Their decisions must be reconstructed indirectly. Their intentions remain uncertain. The city's decline presents an equally challenging puzzle. By the 13th century, Kumbi Saleh had lost much of its former prominence. The reasons remain debated among historians and archaeologists. Several factors may have contributed. Changes in trade routes could have reduced economic importance. Political fragmentation may have weakened centralized authority. Environmental pressures may have affected local conditions. Competition from emerging powers may have altered regional dynamics. None of these explanations fully resolves the question. The decline appears complex, gradual, multifaceted. As often happens in history, there was probably no single cause. Instead, multiple forces likely interacted over generations. The result was transformation. The city faded, its influence diminished, its buildings deteriorated, and eventually much of its story disappeared from memory. You stand among the ruins today, and it is difficult to imagine the scale of activity that once defined this place. The markets are gone. The caravans are gone. The royal court is gone. Only fragments remain. Stone foundations, artifacts, clues, enough to reveal greatness, not enough to explain it completely. and that incompleteness continues to fascinate researchers. How large was the city at its peak? How closely do archaeological discoveries correspond to medieval descriptions? What was daily life truly like for the merchants, artisans, and families who lived here? And how much of the Ghana Empire's history remains hidden beneath layers of earth that have yet to be excavated? As twilight settles across the Sahel and shadows stretch over the ancient ruins, Gumbi Saleh remains suspended between history and legend. It stands as evidence of a powerful African kingdom whose influence once reached far beyond the horizon. Yet despite everything that has been uncovered, the city continues to guard its secrets. The caravans no longer arrive, the gold no longer flows, but the mystery endures, waiting beneath the soil of West Africa for the next discovery that may illuminate another chapter of a remarkable and still unfinished story. Deep within Egypt's western desert, far from the crowded banks of the Nile, the ruins of an ancient town emerge from the sands of the Dakhla oasis. Mud brick walls rise only a few feet above the ground, fragments of streets cut through the landscape. Scattered pottery glitters beneath the desert sun. At first glance, Amhida seems isolated, forgotten, a remote outpost on the edge of the ancient world. But appearances can be misleading. For centuries, this settlement stood at the crossroads of cultures, religions, and empires. It connected the deserts of North Africa with the Mediterranean world. It witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. It survived political upheavals that transformed entire civilizations. And perhaps most remarkably, it preserved an unusually intimate record of everyday life. Not the lives of kings, not the lives of conquerors, but the lives of ordinary people, teachers, farmers, administrators, children, families. The ancient name of the settlement was Trimithis. Today, it is known as Amhida, and despite years of excavation, many aspects of its story remain surprisingly mysterious. The Dakhla oasis occupies a unique place in Egyptian history. While the Nile Valley served as the heart of the civilization, the oases scattered across the western desert formed important extensions of that world. They provided water, agricultural land, and strategic stopping points for travelers crossing otherwise hostile terrain. Life here depended upon springs and underground water sources. Without them, settlement would have been impossible. With them, communities flourished. Amhida emerged within this environment and eventually became one of the most significant towns in the oasis. Its history stretches across multiple eras, but the settlement reached particular prominence during the Roman period, when Egypt formed part of the vast Roman Empire. By this time, trade routes linked the oasis to wider networks extending across North Africa and the Mediterranean. The town was no isolated desert village. It was connected, economically, politically, culturally. Goods moved through the oasis. Ideas moved through the oasis. People moved through the oasis. And traces of those movements remain visible in the archaeological record. One of the most extraordinary discoveries at Amhida involves education. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of what appears to have been a school, complete with written texts preserved on walls. In one room, Greek literary passages survive where they were once copied and studied by students. The find is remarkable, not because schools are unknown in the ancient world, but because such direct evidence of teaching is rare. For a moment, the past becomes unusually vivid. You can imagine students seated within the room, teachers dictating lessons, exercises being copied, mistakes being corrected, knowledge passing from one generation to the next. History suddenly feels personal. The discovery also reveals something important about the community itself. Education mattered here. Literacy mattered here. Participation in the broader cultural world of the Roman Empire mattered here. The oasis was remote geographically. It was not remote intellectually. Amhida contained individuals familiar with Greek language and literature, demonstrating the remarkable reach of Mediterranean cultural traditions. Yet the town was never simply Greek or Roman. Like much of Egypt, it blended influences. Local traditions endured. Older beliefs persisted. New ideas arrived and mixed with existing practices. The result was a complex cultural landscape, a place where multiple identities could coexist. This complexity appears throughout the archaeological remains. Residential buildings reveal aspects of daily life. Workshops indicate economic activity. Administrative structures suggest organized governance. Temples and religious spaces point toward spiritual practices that evolved over time. The town was alive with activity for centuries. Imagine walking its streets during the 4th century CE. The sun rises over the oasis. Farmers head toward cultivated fields sustained by precious water sources. Merchants conduct business. Children attend lessons. Officials manage local affairs. Religious rituals unfold in sacred spaces. Life follows familiar rhythms. Work, family, community. Yet beyond the oasis lies the vast desert, a reminder of both vulnerability and opportunity. The desert protected the settlement from some dangers. It also connected it to distant regions through caravan routes. Travelers crossing the western desert often relied upon oasis settlements like Amhida for survival. Water, food, shelter, and information could all be found here. The town served as a node within larger networks, a place where journeys paused, a place where stories arrived, a place where worlds intersected. Religion forms another fascinating chapter of the site's history. Over the centuries, the inhabitants experienced profound spiritual transformations. Ancient Egyptian traditions interacted with Greco-Roman influences. Later, Christianity spread through the region, reshaping local religious life. Evidence of these changes survives in architecture, artifacts, and written materials. Yet many details remain uncertain. How quickly did new beliefs spread? How did local communities adapt? What older traditions survived beneath newer religious identities? The archaeological record provides hints, not complete answers. One of the recurring themes at Amhida is preservation. The dry desert environment protected materials that might have disappeared elsewhere. Texts survived. Architectural features survived. Artifacts survived. As a result, archaeologists can reconstruct aspects of life with unusual precision. And yet, even here, gaps remain. Large portions of the settlement have not been fully explored. Countless structures remain buried. Important documents may still lie hidden beneath layers of sand and debris. Every excavation reveals something new. Every discovery raises additional questions. The town's eventual decline remains one of those questions. Like many ancient settlements, Amhida did not vanish suddenly. Instead, it appears to have experienced gradual change. Political transformations affected Egypt. Economic patterns shifted. Regional conditions evolved. Over time, the settlement lost prominence. Population decreased. Buildings fell into disrepair. The desert advanced. The town slowly slipped from history. Its residents departed. Its streets emptied. Its memory faded. Centuries passed before archaeologists began piecing together its story once more. You stand among the ruins today, and the silence is striking. Wind moves across abandoned walls. The oasis remains green in the distance. The contrast between life and desert feels almost symbolic. Civilizations endure, then they change, then they disappear, yet traces remain. Amhida preserves those traces with remarkable clarity, but not complete clarity. Who were the individuals whose lessons survive on classroom walls? What conversations took place in the markets and homes of Trimithis? How did ordinary people experience the great political and religious transformations reshaping the Roman world? And how many answers still lie buried beneath the sands of the Dakhla oasis? As evening settles across the desert and shadows lengthen over the ancient town, Amhida remains suspended between memory and mystery. Its ruins offer one of the most intimate glimpses into everyday life in Roman Egypt. Yet the most important stories may still be hidden, waiting beneath the sand, waiting to be discovered, waiting to reveal another fragment of a world that has not entirely surrendered its secrets. In the lush lowlands of eastern Guatemala, where tropical forests thrive beneath heavy rains and rivers wind through fertile valleys, the remains of an ancient Maya city emerge from the greenery. Towering stone monuments stand among open plazas. Intricate carvings cover their surfaces. Centuries of weathering have softened their edges, but their presence remains unmistakable. They are enormous, silent, and deeply mysterious. The city is known as Quirigua, and although it was smaller than many of the great Maya capitals, it produced some of the most extraordinary monuments in the ancient Americas. For centuries, these colossal stones have puzzled explorers, archaeologists, and historians alike. Who commissioned them? Why were they built on such an immense scale? And how did a relatively small city suddenly rise to prominence before fading once again into obscurity? The answers lie somewhere within the tangled history of power, ambition, and rivalry that shaped the Maya world. Quirigua occupies a strategic position near the Motagua River, one of the most important waterways in the region. This location provided access to trade routes linking the Caribbean coast, the Maya lowlands, and the highlands farther inland. Geography mattered. It always mattered. Control of movement meant access to resources. Access to resources meant influence. Influence created opportunity. For much of its early history, however, Quirigua appears to have existed in the shadow of a more powerful neighbor. That neighbor was Copan. Located to the southeast, Copan developed into one of the most sophisticated cities in the Maya world. Its rulers commanded substantial authority, and evidence suggests that Quirigua may initially have functioned as a subordinate center within Copan's sphere of influence. At least, that is how the story seems to begin. The story does not stay that way. By the 8th century CE, something changed, dramatically. A ruler known today by the nickname Kawak Sky ascended the throne of Quirigua. Under his leadership, the city embarked upon a remarkable transformation. What had once been a secondary center suddenly began asserting itself with new confidence. Then came one of the most extraordinary events recorded in Maya history. In 738 CE, Quirigua captured the ruler of Copan, not a general, not a noble, the king himself. The event is documented through Maya inscriptions and remains astonishing even today. Capturing a rival ruler was rare enough. Capturing the king of a far more powerful neighboring city was extraordinary. The consequences were profound. Copan's influence suffered. Quirigua's prestige soared. Almost overnight, the balance of power shifted. How exactly Quirigua accomplished this remains debated. Some researchers suspect support from larger regional powers. Others emphasize changing political alliances within the Maya world. The full story remains elusive, but the outcome is clear. Quirigua emerged victorious, and its rulers intended everyone to know it. The city's most famous monuments belong largely to the period following this political triumph. These monuments are known as stelae, massive carved stone pillars erected within ceremonial plazas. Stelae appear throughout the Maya world, but those of Quirigua are exceptional. Some reach heights exceeding 10 meters. Several weigh dozens of tons. They rank among the largest freestanding stone monuments ever created in the ancient Americas. The scale is breathtaking. Even modern visitors often find themselves staring upward in disbelief. The carvings covering these monuments are equally impressive. Intricate inscriptions record historical events, royal achievements, ceremonial activities, and calendrical information. Human figures emerge from the stone with remarkable detail and artistic sophistication. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, yet it raises difficult questions. How did a city of relatively modest size marshal the labor and resources necessary to create such immense works? Why invest so heavily in monuments? What message were the rulers attempting to convey? The answer may lie in legitimacy. Political victories create opportunities. They also create challenges. A ruler seeking to establish authority must persuade others to recognize it. Monumental architecture becomes a form of communication. It projects power. It shapes memory. It transforms political success into something visible and enduring. The stones themselves become statements, declarations carved into the landscape. Imagine arriving at Quirigua during its golden age. The plazas are active with ceremonies. Priests conduct rituals before gathered crowds. Nobles oversee political affairs. Artisans continue work on new monuments. Visitors approach the city and encounter towering stelae unlike anything they have seen before. The effect must have been overwhelming. The city announces its importance immediately, not through walls, not through armies, through stone, through symbolism, through scale. One of the most intriguing features of Quirigua is the extraordinary quality of its inscriptions. Maya writing remains one of the most sophisticated script systems developed in the ancient Americas, and the texts at Quirigua provide valuable insights into political events and royal ideology. Yet they also remind us of archaeology's limitations. The inscriptions tell us what rulers wanted remembered. They do not necessarily tell us everything. Victories are celebrated. Defeats are minimized. Political narratives are carefully constructed. As a result, even written evidence must be interpreted cautiously. The city reveals another remarkable feature: large sculpted boulders known as zoomorphs. Unlike the vertical stelae, these monuments take the form of massive carved stones covered with elaborate imagery and inscriptions. Their precise symbolism remains debated. They may represent mythological beings, sacred landscapes, or cosmological concepts embedded within Maya belief systems. The carvings are astonishingly complex. Every surface seems alive with imagery. Every detail appears intentional. Yet many meanings remain uncertain. Centuries have passed. Languages changed. Contexts disappeared. Interpretation remains incomplete. Then, as happens so often in the Maya world, decline arrived. By the 9th century, Quirigua experienced significant reduction in activity. Population levels fell. Construction slowed. The city gradually lost the prominence it had achieved. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental pressures may have contributed. Political instability may have disrupted regional systems. Economic changes may have altered trade networks. No single explanation satisfies every question. The broader Maya world was undergoing transformation. Quirigua was part of that process. Eventually, the plazas emptied. The monuments remained. The forest advanced. The city faded from memory. You stand among the stelae today and they still dominate the landscape. Their size remains impressive. Their inscriptions remain intricate. Their purpose remains only partially understood. The rulers who commissioned them are gone. The ceremonies are gone. The city itself is largely gone, but the stones endure, and so do the mysteries. How did Quirigua achieve its dramatic rise to power? What alliances shaped its success? What meanings were encoded within its extraordinary monuments? And how much of its history remains hidden beneath the tropical soil? As shadows lengthen across the plazas and the forest grows quiet, Quirigua continues to guard its secrets. The giant stones still stand where Maya rulers placed them more than 1,000 years ago, watching, waiting, and refusing to reveal their full story. In the western interior of southern India, near the banks of the Noyal River, an ancient settlement lies beneath fields and quiet countryside. At first glance, there is little to suggest that this landscape once formed part of a vibrant network connecting distant regions of the ancient world. No towering temples dominate the horizon. No massive fortifications rise from the earth. No monumental palaces announce the presence of kings. Yet beneath the soil of Kodumanal, archaeologists uncovered evidence of something equally remarkable: a center of craftsmanship, a crossroads of trade, a community linked to networks stretching across the Indian subcontinent and beyond. And despite decades of research, many aspects of its story remain surprisingly elusive. The settlement flourished during a period often associated with the early historic era of South India, roughly between the 3rd century BCE and the 3rd century CE. This was an age of expanding trade, technological innovation, and growing interaction between distant cultures. The great empires of northern India influenced vast territories. Maritime commerce connected the Indian Ocean world. Merchants crossed mountains, rivers, and deserts carrying valuable goods. Ideas traveled alongside them. Kodumanal occupied an important position within this dynamic landscape. Located near routes linking the western coast of India with the fertile plains farther east, the settlement stood at a strategic junction. Goods moving between regions often pass through areas like this. Geography created opportunity. And the people of Kodumanal appear to have recognized it. Archaeological excavations revealed a settlement unlike many others from the same period. Rather than serving primarily as a political capital or religious center, Kodumanal appears to have been deeply connected to production and exchange. It was a place where things were made, and made exceptionally well. One of the most striking discoveries involves bead manufacturing. Thousands of beads and bead-making materials have been uncovered at the site. Carnelian, quartz, agate, and other stones were carefully shaped into decorative objects of remarkable quality. The craftsmanship required skill, patience, experience. Some beads were polished to extraordinary precision, demonstrating techniques refined over generations. Workshops produced items that likely traveled far beyond the settlement itself. This raises an intriguing possibility. People living hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away may once have worn ornaments created in Kodumanal. The settlement's influence may have extended far beyond its size. Evidence for long-distance trade supports this idea. Artifacts recovered from the site suggest connections with multiple regions. Certain materials originated elsewhere, indicating the movement of goods across substantial distances. Roman coins and imported objects, discovered in parts of South India, reveal the broader context in which Kodumanal existed. The Indian Ocean world was becoming increasingly interconnected. Ships crossed the Arabian Sea. Merchants exchanged commodities. Foreign goods arrived in Indian ports. Local products traveled outward. Kodumanal appears to have participated in this larger economic system, perhaps indirectly, perhaps directly. The exact nature of those connections remains uncertain, but the evidence points toward engagement with a wider world. The settlement was not isolated. Far from it. Metalworking provides another fascinating chapter of the story. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of iron production and related activities. Tools, weapons, and manufacturing debris indicate significant expertise in metallurgy. Iron transformed societies. It improved agricultural tools, enhanced weaponry, expanded possibilities. Communities capable of producing high-quality metal goods often occupied important economic positions. Kodumanal seems to have been one such community. Imagine walking through the settlement during its height. Artisans shape beads inside workshops. Metalworkers tend furnaces glowing with intense heat. Traders arrive carrying goods from distant regions. Pack animals move along nearby routes. Conversations unfold in markets filled with products from multiple sources. The settlement hums with activity, production, exchange, movement. It feels connected to forces extending far beyond the local landscape. Yet for all that archaeology has revealed, fundamental questions remain. One of the most intriguing concerns the people themselves. Who lived here? Ancient Tamil literature from the broader region speaks of merchants, warriors, poets, and rulers. Some researchers believe Kodumanal may correspond to places mentioned in early literary traditions. The connections are plausible, but not certain. The gap between archaeology and literature remains difficult to bridge. Without definitive evidence, the identification remains debated. Another remarkable aspect of the site involves burial practices. Excavations uncovered megalithic burials associated with the broader cultural traditions of southern India. These burials contained artifacts, including weapons, ornaments, and pottery. The discoveries provide valuable clues regarding social organization and belief systems. Yet they also generate new mysteries. What rituals accompanied burial? What ideas shaped attitudes toward death? How did communities understand ancestry and memory? The archaeological record preserves objects. It rarely preserves explanations. The people of Kodumanal left behind tools, ornaments, and graves, not detailed accounts of their beliefs. As a result, interpretation remains incomplete. The settlement's relationship with regional political powers presents another puzzle. South India during this period was home to emerging kingdoms and complex political networks. The Chera, Chola, and Pandya polities influenced large portions of the region. Where exactly did Kodumanal fit within this landscape? Was it directly controlled by powerful rulers? Did it enjoy substantial autonomy? Did local elites manage trade and production independently? The evidence remains ambiguous. Perhaps the settlement occupied multiple roles over time. Economic centers often adapt to changing political realities. Prosperity attracts attention. Attention brings opportunity and risk. The eventual decline of Kodumanal remains imperfectly understood. At some point, activity diminished. Workshops fell silent. Trade patterns changed. The settlement lost the prominence it once enjoyed. Why? Several possibilities exist. Shifting trade routes may have reduced economic importance. Political changes may have altered regional dynamics. Environmental factors may have influenced settlement patterns. No single explanation has achieved universal acceptance. Like many ancient communities, Kodumanal appears to have experienced a gradual transformation rather than a sudden collapse. Its significance faded. Its structures deteriorated. Its memory became fragmented. Centuries passed before archaeology began recovering its story. You stand at the site today, and much of its former vitality must be imagined. The workshops are gone. The traders are gone. The furnaces have cooled. Only traces remain, fragments of beads, pieces of iron, burials beneath the earth. Yet those traces reveal something extraordinary. A community deeply engaged with technology, craftsmanship, and commerce. A settlement connected to networks spanning vast distances. A place where local skill intersected with global exchange long before the modern world existed. And still, important mysteries endure. Who controlled the industries that flourished here? How extensive were the settlement's commercial connections? What languages echoed through its workshops and markets? And how many secrets remain buried beneath the fields of Tamil Nadu? As evening settles across the landscape and shadows stretch over the ancient remains, Kodumanal continues to challenge assumptions about the ancient world. It reminds us that history is not made only in capitals and royal courts. Sometimes it is made in workshops, along trade routes, in communities whose influence extended far beyond their horizons, and whose full story has yet to be uncovered. Near the banks of the Tamiraparani River in southern India, beneath fields that have supported human communities for generations, lies one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites on the Indian subcontinent. The landscape appears calm today. Villages dot the countryside. Farmers work the land. The river continues its journey toward the sea. Yet beneath this ordinary setting, archaeologists uncovered a vast, ancient burial ground unlike anything previously known in the region. Hundreds of urns, thousands of artifacts, human remains, weapons, ornaments, objects whose meanings are still debated. The site is known as Adichanallur, and more than a century after its first major excavations, it continues to raise profound questions about the origins of complex societies in South India. Who were the people buried here? How advanced was their culture? And why does so much of their story remain hidden despite the extraordinary discoveries already made? The mystery begins with the sheer scale of the site. Adichanallur first attracted significant scholarly attention during the late 19th century, when excavators uncovered large burial urns beneath the earth. As investigations expanded, it became clear that this was no ordinary cemetery. The site covered a vast area. Burials appeared in remarkable numbers, and many contained an astonishing variety of objects. The discoveries immediately challenged assumptions about the ancient history of southern India. For decades, historians had relied heavily upon literary sources and later historical traditions. Archaeology was still revealing how deep the region's past truly extended. Adichanallur changed that conversation. The burial urns themselves remain among the most striking features of the site. Some are large enough to contain complete human remains. Others hold cremated remains, grave goods, or both. Many were carefully placed beneath the ground along with pottery, tools, ornaments, and other objects. The attention given to burial practices is unmistakable. Death mattered here. Memory mattered here. The treatment of the dead appears to have involved elaborate rituals whose full meaning remains unknown. Archaeologists can identify patterns. They can document objects. They can reconstruct procedures. But understanding belief is far more difficult. The people who performed these ceremonies left few direct explanations. Their actions survive. Their voices do not. One of the most fascinating aspects of Adichanallur concerns its age. Dating evidence suggests that parts of the site may extend back more than 2,000 years, with some researchers proposing even earlier origins for certain cultural developments associated with the region. The exact chronology remains a topic of debate, yet regardless of the precise dates, one fact is clear. The community responsible for these burials possessed considerable sophistication. The artifacts demonstrate advanced craftsmanship. Metal objects, including iron tools and weapons, reveal technical expertise. Decorative ornaments display artistic skill. Pottery exhibits a range of forms and styles reflecting established traditions. This was not a simple society, nor was it isolated. Evidence points toward participation in broader networks of interaction. Trade likely played an important role. The Tamiraparani River connected inland areas with the coast, creating opportunities for movement and exchange. Southern India occupied a strategic position within larger maritime systems, linking different parts of the Indian Ocean world. Goods traveled, people traveled, ideas traveled. Communities situated along these routes often benefited from the resulting connections. Adichanallur may have been one of them. Imagine standing near the settlement associated with the burial ground during its height. Smoke rises from workshops. Craftsmen shape metal and pottery. Boats move along the river carrying goods and travelers. Families conduct daily activities, while religious rituals mark important moments in life and death. The community feels established, organized, confident in its traditions. Yet much of what defined that world remains frustratingly elusive. One reason is that the burial site has often revealed more information about death than about everyday life. Cemeteries preserve certain aspects of the past exceptionally well, but they also create limitations. Grave goods reflect choices made during funerary rituals rather than ordinary daily activities. What people buried with the dead may not perfectly represent how they lived. This distinction matters, and it complicates interpretation. Among the most intriguing discoveries are bronze objects displaying remarkable craftsmanship. Some artifacts appear ceremonial, others may have served practical functions. Their precise purposes remain uncertain in many cases. The same is true for several unusual items recovered from the site. Researchers continue debating their significance. Were they symbols of status? Religious objects? Markers of identity? The evidence rarely provides definitive answers. Instead, it offers possibilities, and possibilities often generate further questions. Human remains recovered from the site add another layer of complexity. Scientific studies have sought to understand ancestry, health, diet, and population history. Such research can reveal valuable information about ancient communities, yet results frequently raise new mysteries. How were these populations related to other groups in South India? What migrations shaped the region? How much continuity exists between ancient and later communities? The answers remain incomplete. History rarely presents itself neatly. Another enduring question concerns social organization. The variation among burials suggests differences in status or role. Some graves contain richer collections of objects than others. Certain individuals may have occupied positions of authority or prestige within the community. But what kind of authority? Political? Religious? Economic? Without written records, certainty remains elusive. The archaeological evidence hints at hierarchy. It does not fully explain it. The broader historical significance of Adichanallur continues to grow as new discoveries emerge. Many researchers view the site as a key source of information about the cultural foundations that preceded later developments in South Indian history. It offers a glimpse into a world that existed before extensive written documentation became common, a world known primarily through material remains, a world still only partially understood. And perhaps that is what makes the site so compelling. The artifacts are impressive, the burials are remarkable, but the unanswered questions are even more fascinating. Who were the people whose remains fill these urns? What languages did they speak? What stories did they tell? What gods did they worship? How did they understand life, death, and the world around them? You stand at Adichanallur today, and the landscape offers few obvious clues. The fields seem ordinary. The river flows quietly nearby. Nothing immediately reveals the extraordinary history concealed beneath the soil. Yet, beneath your feet lies one of the most important archaeological puzzles in South Asia, a place where hundreds of ancient lives intersect, a place where memory was preserved through ritual, a place where the dead continue to tell stories that the living have not yet fully learned to understand. As evening settles across the Tamirapurani Valley and shadows stretch over the earth, Adichanallur remains suspended between discovery and mystery. Every excavation reveals another fragment of a forgotten world, and every fragment reminds us how much remains hidden, waiting beneath the soil for the next clue to emerge from the silence of the past. On the banks of the Vaigai River in southern India, where fertile plains stretch beneath a hot and shifting sky, lies a settlement that has begun to reshape modern understanding of ancient South Asian history. The landscape is unassuming today. Fields extend in quiet patterns. Villages rest along the river's course. Life continues as it has for generations. Yet beneath this ordinary surface, archaeology has revealed something extraordinary. A densely organized settlement, a planned urban environment, a community that flourished more than 2,000 years ago, with a level of sophistication that continues to surprise researchers. This is Keladi, and despite ongoing excavations, much of its story remains unresolved. The first major discoveries at Keladi began to emerge in the 21st century, when systematic excavations uncovered evidence of a large, ancient habitation site. What initially appeared to be a modest settlement quickly expanded in scale as more layers were revealed. Walls, floors, drainage systems, storage facilities, craft areas. The pattern was unmistakable. This was not a scattered village. It was a structured town. One of the most striking aspects of Keladi is its urban planning. The settlement reveals a clear organization of space, with residential areas, industrial zones, and drainage networks arranged in a coherent layout. Streets were aligned with intention. Buildings were constructed with consistency. Water management systems were integrated into daily life. Such planning implies coordination. Coordination implies governance. And governance implies social complexity. Yet the precise nature of that organization remains uncertain. Who planned Keladi? Was it centrally directed, or did it emerge through collective decisions over time? The archaeological record provides clues, but not complete answers. One of the most significant discoveries involves the evidence of industrial activity. Excavations uncovered large quantities of artifacts related to bead-making, pottery production, and metalwork. These finds indicate that Keladi was not only a residential center, but also a hub of craftsmanship. Beads made from semi-precious stones have been found in abundance. Carnelian, agate, quartz, and other materials were shaped, polished, and finished with remarkable precision. The presence of manufacturing debris suggests specialized workshops where skilled artisans worked systematically. This level of production implies trade, and trade implies connections. Kiladi was not isolated from the wider world. Far from it. The settlement appears to have participated in regional and possibly long-distance exchange networks. Goods produced here may have circulated across southern India and beyond, linking Kiladi to broader economic systems. The Vaigai River played a crucial role in this connectivity. Rivers have always been lifelines for civilizations, providing water, transport routes, and fertile land. Kiladi's location along this waterway positioned it advantageously within the landscape. Movement was possible, interaction was inevitable, and prosperity followed. Another major discovery that has drawn widespread attention is the presence of writing. Pottery fragments and artifacts from Kiladi bear inscriptions in an early form of Tamil Brahmi script. These markings represent one of the earliest known examples of writing in the Tamil language. The implications are profound. Writing changes everything. It allows communication across distance and time. It enables administration, record-keeping, and cultural transmission. It marks a shift toward increasingly complex societies. The inscriptions at Kiladi suggest that literacy was present among segments of the population, not confined to elite centers far away, but embedded within everyday life in southern India. Yet, interpretation remains cautious. What exactly were these inscriptions used for? Were they administrative labels, ownership marks, personal expressions, religious references? Each possibility opens a different window into the past, and none can be confirmed with absolute certainty. Imagine walking through Kiladi at its height more than 2 millennia ago. The river flows nearby. Workshops echo with the sounds of production. Craftsmen shape beads with careful precision. Pottery is fired in kilns. Goods are stored, exchanged, and transported. Children move through streets laid out in organized patterns. Life unfolds with rhythm and structure. The settlement feels active, connected, purposeful. But behind this apparent order lies a series of unanswered questions. One of the most important concerns political structure. What kind of authority governed Kiladi? Some researchers suggest the presence of a local administrative system capable of coordinating urban planning and economic activity. Others propose more decentralized arrangements where community groups played a significant role. The evidence does not point clearly in one direction. Another question involves cultural identity. Kiladi is often discussed in relation to early Tamil civilization. The inscriptions, artifacts, and regional context all support connections to ancient Tamil-speaking populations. But cultural identity is never simple. It is shaped over time, influenced by migration, trade, interaction, and adaptation. Kiladi may represent a formative stage in that long process. One of the most intriguing aspects of the site is the sophistication of its drainage system. Channels were constructed to manage water flow through the settlement, preventing flooding and maintaining sanitation. Urban infrastructure of this kind is a hallmark of advanced planning. It reflects concern for public health, environmental management, and long-term sustainability. Such systems require coordination and maintenance. They imply shared responsibility within the community. Yet, the full extent of Kiladi's governance structure remains unknown. Religious life at the settlement is even more difficult to reconstruct. Unlike some ancient cultures with extensive temple complexes or clear ritual architecture, Keladi has revealed fewer explicit religious markers. This absence raises questions. Was religious practice integrated into daily life rather than centralized in monumental structures? Were sacred spaces made of perishable materials that did not survive? Or have key sites simply not yet been discovered? Archaeology often advances slowly, revealing its answers layer by layer. The timeline of Keladi adds another dimension to its mystery. Evidence suggests that the settlement flourished during the early historic period, roughly between the 6th century BCE and the first few centuries CE. This was a transformative era across the Indian subcontinent. Empires rose and expanded. Trade networks intensified. Urban centers developed in multiple regions. Keladi appears to have been part of this broader historical momentum, yet its exact role within that larger picture remains under investigation. The eventual decline of the settlement is not fully understood. As with many ancient sites, activity appears to have decreased over time. Populations shifted. Economic patterns changed. The urban structure gradually faded. No single cause has been identified. Environmental changes, political transformations, or shifting trade routes may all have contributed. Or perhaps it was a combination of factors interacting over generations. You stand at Keladi today, and the surface reveals little of its complexity. The river continues its course. Fields stretch quietly under the sun. But beneath the soil lies a city that challenges long-held assumptions about the development of civilization in southern India. A city with streets, with industries, with writing, with structure, and still with unanswered questions. Who were the planners behind this urban design? How far did its trade networks extend? What stories were recorded in its earliest Tamil inscriptions? And how much of Keladi's history still lies buried beneath the Vaigai plains, waiting to reshape what we think we know about the ancient world? As daylight fades across the river valley, Keladi remains suspended between revelation and uncertainty. Archaeology has opened a door into its past, but the full story is still unfolding. And perhaps, like so many ancient cities, its deepest secrets are not yet ready to be fully revealed. There are historical mysteries that remain hidden, buried beneath deserts, lost beneath forests, forgotten beneath the weight of time, yet traces endure. Fragments of walls, silent monuments, cryptic symbols carved by